Als erstes auf der Bühne darf ich willkommen heißen zu der ersten Session Enabling Collaborations, den Lukas Schor von Gnosis Safe. Gnosis entwickelt Blockchain-basierte Lösungen für das Verwalten von digitalen Werten. Bitte.
Ja, merci vielmals. Merci für die Einladung. Es freut mich sehr, heute den Input geben für unsere erste Session, wo es um das Thema Kollaboration geht. Ja, was machen wir bei Gnosis Safe? An sich, wenn man Blockchain-Anwendungen braucht, braucht man immer ein Konto. Und so wie die meisten Kontos auf Blockchain heutzutage funktionieren, ist es so, dass man einen digitalen Schlüssel hat, der das Konto kontrolliert. Und der digitale Schlüssel, viele haben das dann abgeschrieben aus so einem 24-Wörter-Satz, den sie irgendwo in einem Schrank versteckt haben. Aber das Problem dort ist, das ist wie wenn du ein Haus hast, wo du einen Schlüssel hast. Und wenn du diesen Schlüssel verlierst, kannst du nicht mehr ins Haus gehen. Du kannst nicht mal das Schlüsselloch austauschen oder du kannst nicht irgendwie einem Partner oder einem Nachbarn einen Schlüssel geben. Die Verwaltung hat keinen Schlüssel. Das ist echt nur der einzige Punkt, wo etwas falsch gehen kann. Und das ist nicht die Lösung, wenn man digitale Werte verwalten will, speziell wenn man irgendwie eine grössere Menge an digitalen Werten verwalten will, weil wenn du im Unternehmen bist, musst du mehr Kontrolle haben über das. Du kannst nicht das Risiko von diesem einzelnen digitalen Schlüssel haben. Und das machen wir bei Gnosis Safe, dass wir quasi ein intelligentes Konto machen für Blockchain, wo man Sachen abbauen kann wie Kollektivsignaturen, man kann Sperrlisten implementieren, man kann Budgets machen, sprich, dass zum Beispiel ein Department in der Firma hat ein gewisses Budget, wo sie Transaktionen machen können, aber wenn es über das Budget hinausgeht, muss man dann mehr Involvement in der Firma haben. Und spannende Sachen, die man damit machen kann, wo es dann auch ins Thema Kollaboration geht, ist, dass man eben so ein Konto hat, das vielleicht von verschiedenen Leuten kontrolliert ist, von einem CFO, CEO, CTO. Und man braucht jetzt 2 Unterschriften von diesen Parteien, um eine größere Transaktion auszuführen. Was auch spannend ist und was einer der Haupt-Use-Cases von Gnosis Safe im Moment ist im DAO-Kontext, also dezentrale Autonomous Organizations, wo quasi das Konto nicht von einer rechtlichen Einheit kontrolliert wird, sondern von einer Masse an Leuten, die quasi abstimmen darüber, was wir mit gewissen digitalen Werten machen. Wenn wir die irgendwo anschieben, wenn wir die für etwas brauchen, wenn wir die ausstellen und so weiter. Da gibt es auch die Möglichkeit, jetzt als Einzelanwender von so einem Konto, dass man auch andere Leute mit involviert, also dass man zum Beispiel kollaboriert mit einer Bank oder einer Versicherung, dass du kleinere Transaktionen ohne die Zustimmung von denen kannst ausführen. Für größere Transaktionen muss dann die Bank drüber schauen und sagen, das ist alles tiptop, du hast kein Gefahr und da ist alles gut. Und so können wir halt von dem einzelnen Schlüssel, wo alles kontrolliert, weggehen und ein bisschen mehr quasi Expertise von verschiedenen Leuten und ein bisschen mehr Kollaboration mit in die Verwaltung von digitalen Werten bringen. Und weil es halt so viele Möglichkeiten gibt, wie man so ein intelligentes Konto kann bauen kann, ist das nicht etwas, was wir aus Projekt selber machen wollen, sondern wir sehen das aus Ökosystem, das sich bilden wird, auf quasi dieser Technologie von diesem intelligenten Blockchain-Konto. Und die werden sich verschiedene Teams werden Lösungen bauen, die sich für verschiedene Nutzergruppen, verschiedene Use Cases werden optimieren. Und wir haben schon heute 30 Teams, die das machen. Und das ist quasi unsere Aufgabe, quasi Basistechnologie zu bauen und den Leuten helfen, den Teams zu helfen, darauf aufzubauen. Darum haben wir so einen Ökosystemgedanken im Projekt, wo wir zusammen arbeiten mit anderen Teams und denen helfen, die Lösungen zu bauen. Und ein zentraler Aspekt von diesem Ökosystemgedanken ist der Full Node. Das ist ein Coworking Space, den es seit 2018 gibt, im Herzen von Berlin, in Kreuzberg. Das ist das Gebäude dort auf der rechten Seite. Wir haben einen ganzen Stock dort. Und das ist echt komplett Blockchain-fokussierter Coworking Space und das merkt man wirklich, wenn man dort drin ist. Also du siehst auch überall Stickers von verschiedenen Projekten rumliegen, du siehst Offices von bekannten Blockchain-Projekten wie Raiden oder Cosmos. Du siehst jetzt irgendwie so kleine Details wie Blockchain-Adressen auf den Glastüren und so weiter. Ist wirklich cool. Und es ist nicht nur ein Platz, wo man arbeitet, sondern es ist auch ein Platz, wo man externe Leute einladet, ähnlich wie hier, wo man Präsentationen hat, wo man Workshops hat, soziale Events macht. Es ist quasi das Epizentrum vom Blockchain-Ökosystem in Berlin. Und was für uns wichtig ist bei diesem Full-Node, wo wir da aufgemacht haben, ist, dass der funktional ist. Weil am Ende des Tages muss dort geschaffen werden. Es müssen neue Lösungen gebaut werden, es müssen Möglichkeiten geben, wie man zusammenarbeiten kann, wie man guten Output haben kann. Und darum gibt es verschiedene Bereiche in diesem Gebäude, halt für verschiedene Anwendungen. Es gibt einen offenen Raum, wo man zusammen arbeiten kann, wo man auch als Einzelperson reinhocken und arbeiten kann. Es gibt so ein bisschen mehr Relax-Areas, wo man sich erholen kann. Es gibt Meeting-Rooms, wo man ein bisschen mehr Privatsphäre hat, wo man sich miteinander halten kann. Es gibt auch Coffee-Corners natürlich und Workshop-Room. Aber auch ein Podcast-Studio haben wir dort, wo man Podcasts aufnehmen kann, wo man auch Online-Konferenzen oder Präsentationen halten kann. Es gibt auch Team-Offices. Wenn jetzt du ein neues Projekt startest und irgendeiner schwach ist und willst halt ein bisschen mehr die eigenen Raum haben, dann kannst du das überzügeln. Wir haben so ein bisschen Whiteboard-Corners, wo man kreativ werden kann. Und was speziell während der Corona-Zeit extrem wichtig ist, sind die Teleboxen. Das heisst, so kleine Räume, 1 auf 1, also 1 Quadratmeter, wo du reinhocken und deine Online-Meetings haben. Und dann gleich nicht komplett remote bist, sondern dass dann gleich Leute um dich herum hast, die dann in der Pause kannst mit denen schwätzen. Aber was auch extrem wichtig ist beim Thema funktional, ist Fun in dem. Speziell in einem kreativen Bereich, in einem Innovation Hub, muss man auch schauen, dass es nicht ganz steril ist, dass man ein bisschen Freude hat miteinander, dass man ein bisschen Farbe ins Ganze hineinbringt. Auch sehr wichtig hier unser Baumhaus. Wenn du mal eine Nacht lang durchgehackt hast, am nächsten Tag willst du eine kurze Pause machen, willst ein bisschen schlafen oder willst ein bisschen abschalten. Wir haben auch sehr viele kleinere soziale Events, spontane Events, ein Wine-Tasting oder jeden Mittwochmorgen haben wir ein Morgen miteinander oder Kunstausstellung, einfach Möglichkeiten, wie man ein bisschen Durchmischung bringen kann. Es gibt 50 verschiedene Projekte in diesem Raum und die kleineren Sachen sind die Leute zum Kollaborieren bringen, zum sich austauschen, zum Erfahrungen austauschen. Und eben der Full Node ist eigentlich quasi das Zentrum von unserem Ökosystem. Das brauchen wir strategisch, um jetzt Teams, die auf Gnosis Safe aufbauen, zu uns zu holen, mit denen zu kollaborieren, mit denen unsere Erfahrungen auszutauschen. Zum Beispiel Multis, das ist das Team, das ist eigentlich kein Standort, das ist überall verteilt. Die arbeiten größtenteils remote und treffen sich dann ab und zu bei uns im Full Node. Und das ist ideal für uns, mit denen zu reden und dass die auch Input können liefern, was sie an uns für Anforderungen haben und wir können ihnen Tipps geben, wie sie weiterkommen können. Auch interessant ist Gelato, das Team, das ganz klein angefangen hat mit 2 Leuten im Full Node und mittlerweile sind die auch deutlich mehr und sind auch übrigens jetzt in der Schweiz. Und da sieht man auch so ein bisschen die Zwischenbeziehungen, die entstehen. Weil Gelato ist das Projekt, die haben wir halt von Anfang an gekannt, weil die bei uns waren. Wir haben bei denen auch investiert, ganz, ganz früh und haben denen geholfen, gross zu werden. Die haben dann auch ihr Projekt so aufgebaut, dass es mit dem Gnosis Safe gut funktioniert. Also die sind dann auch, haben eine Integration gemacht und so spielen die ganzen Sachen über die Zeit zusammen. Und auch der Epicenter, das ist ein Blockchain-Podcast, den wir haben. Der ist auch in dem Podcast-Studio, das ich vorhin gezeigt habe. Und das ist auch eine Möglichkeit, wie man quasi einen Podcast brauchen kann, um Kontakt zu knüpfen, um Experten zu sich zu holen, ob jetzt digital oder in echt. Und einfach das Netzwerk weiter aufzubauen. Auch interessant, Stock unten dran, ist Spielfeld. Das ist der Innovation Hub von Roland Berger und Visa. Das ist auch wichtig, dass man nicht den Bezug zur existierenden Welt, zu quasi etablierten Unternehmen verliert und sich als Start-up nur quasi um seine eigenen Sachen kümmert, sondern wir haben dort auch gut Austausch mit denen und sehen so ein bisschen, wie so der traditionelle Finanzbereich funktioniert und wie wir dort können auch mithelfen oder wie sich dort Synergien geben. Auch wichtig ist, dass man in Kontakt bleibt mit der Politik und mit wie sich quasi die Regulierung entwickelt. Darum sind wir auch involviert mit dem Blockchain-Bundesverband. Das ist ein Lobbyverband, der quasi Blockchain-Interessen verbreitet in der deutschen Politik. Auch einfach ein wichtiger Bestandteil des Ökosystems. Dune ist auch quasi so eine Case Study, wo ein kleines Team ist quasi über einen Binance Incubator, wo wir eine gute Verbindung haben, zu unserer Full Node gekommen. Wir haben die dort kennengelernt, haben gemerkt, das ist etwas, ein Produkt, das die bauen, das wir selber brauchen können. Die bauen quasi Analytics-Tools für Blockchain. Sind die ersten quasi zahlenden Kunden geworden von Dune Analytics. Und mittlerweile haben die auch 70 Millionen Investments aufgenommen und sind riesengroß, 100 Leute, die dort arbeiten. Auch grössere Events ermöglicht uns das, nach Berlin zu bringen, durch die ganzen Kontakte, die wir knüpfen können, dass wir Speaker und Panelists und so weiter können an unsere Konferenzen holen, die wir in Berlin haben, zum Beispiel DevCon, die jetzt diesen Sommer stattfindet. Und für mich persönlich die quasi interessanteste oder die Case Study, wo ich am meisten stolz ist 1KX. Das ist Venture Capital Firm, Investment Firm, die sind lange schon bei uns im Full Node. Mit denen die kennen wir seit 3 Jahren und die haben wir sehr gut kennenlernen und die haben jetzt auch uns geholfen, die letzte Fundraising-Runde zu machen, wo wir übrigens nächste Woche bekannt geben. Und ja, so sieht das echt dann auch aus, so das Ökosystem, das wir dort um einen Full Node aufbauen und wo man sieht, die verschiedenen Stakeholder und wie sich das eben auch entwickelt aus Netzwerk, wie das quasi sehr viele Synergien gibt, die man auch am Anfang gar nicht erwartet, wenn man das Ganze so ein bisschen holistisch sieht und seine Rolle quasi in diesem Ökosystem definiert. Das wär's und so können wir den Übergang machen zum Panel.
Gott, den Übergang willst du machen? Zuerst einen grossen Applaus!
Also.
Du darfst gerne Platz nehmen, ja. Wunderbar, danke vielmals. Wir würden jetzt übergehen zum ersten Gespräch. Und für das würde ich jetzt gerne auf Hochdeutsch switchen. Wir haben heute ein bisschen ein Gemisch aus Hochdeutsch, wie ihr schon gehört habt, Schweizerdeutsch und Englisch. Ich hoffe, das ist okay so für alle. Ebenfalls begrüßen darf ich herzlich auf der Bühne Ayla Munro-Hochmeier von For the Win DAO, einem gemeinschaftsbasierten Konzept, welches Ideen in frühen Stadien findet, finanziert und auch fördert. Bitte einmal Platz nehmen. Super. Und auch der Martin, genau, wunderbar, Pongratz, Director Workplace Strategy bei CBRE. Wunderbar, ganz herzlichen Dank. Bevor wir beginnen, jetzt haben wir sehr viel über Lukas' Arbeit gehört. Ayla, kannst du uns sagen, wie deine Arbeit aussieht? In kurzen Sätzen, nicht in einer Viertelstunde.
Ja, das ist immer so ein bisschen die Herausforderung. Aber also unser Ansatz ist, Venture Capital ein bisschen aufzumischen. Also wir haben ganz klare Daten, die sagen, wenn ein Fonds von einem diversen Team gemanagt ist, sind die Renditen 20% höher. Und sie investieren auch in diversere Teams. Und wenn man in diverse Gründerteams investiert, sind die Renditen auch höher, also deutlich höher. Und das sind die Daten und basiert auf diesen Daten haben wir gesagt, okay, wie könnten wir das eigentlich ändern? Und wir sind über einen langen Weg auf DAOs gekommen und haben ein Modell jetzt entwickelt, wo wir Venture Capital über DAOs machen und möglichst viele Leute mitbringen und viele junge Venture-Talente mit uns bringen.
Was macht dieses Modell aus?
Diversität, also statt dass man nur 2 oder 3 Partner in diesem Venture Capital Team hat, kann man 99 in vielen Modellen oder bis zu Tausende Leute haben, die mitbestimmen und mitdenken, neue Ideen reinbringen als Dealflow, aber auch bei Due Diligence zum Beispiel partizipieren und ihr Wissen und Knowledge und Expertise halt auch mit reinbringen in den Prozess.
Martin, was macht ein Workplace-Strategist?
Immer ein Tusch. Wer nicht weiß, was er will, bekommt selten, was er braucht. Und das gilt eben auch für die Ausarbeitung von Arbeitsplatzkonzepten oder für die Bürogebäudeentwicklung. Das sind sehr komplexe Themen eigentlich. Und wenn man dort nicht den Kurs sieht, läuft man Gefahr, sich zu verlieren. Und wir von CBRE Workplace Strategy sorgen eigentlich dafür, dass man sich am Anfang, wenn man etwa Arbeitswelten verändern wollte, Standort verändern will, Standort umbauen will, dass man sich die richtigen Fragen stellt, dass man den Bedarf sauber bestimmt, dass man die Anforderungen so genau, präzise formuliert, dass man entsprechend den Makler, den Architekten, den Innengestalter, den Entwickler sauber briefen kann und dass das Projekt nicht aus den Händen entgleitet. Also richtig aufgleisen und das Projekt dann aber auch entsprechend der Zielsetzung führen, das ist eigentlich unsere Aufgabe.
Wir haben es anfangs gehört, ein Brandbeschleuniger, ganz klar, wie es Sandro Walder gesagt hat, für unseres Arbeiten waren klar die letzten 2 Jahre. Es wird viel mehr dezentral gearbeitet, kommuniziert wird über Chats. Martin, brauchen wir dann in Zukunft überhaupt noch Büros?
Die Frage wird oft gestellt, das ist ein klassisches Schwarz-Weiß. Gefragt, was natürlich immer mit vielen Grauschattierungen beantwortet werden kann. Darüber könnte ich jetzt 3 Stunden referieren. Das ist nicht das Ziel, aber im Großen und Ganzen ist es so, in der Schweiz vor allen Dingen ist mit dem Covid ein echter Damm gebrochen. Also die Schweiz war so eine Art Trutzburg noch, wo man gesagt hat, nein, wir bleiben doch eher im traditionellen Arbeitskonzept verhaftet. Während in Holland, in UK, in Amerika längst ganz anders gearbeitet worden ist. Und das ist mit Covid ganz sicher anders geworden. Also da ist ja sehr viel Aufholbedarf im Sinne von, ja, es virtualisiert sich viel, ja, es wird sehr viel mit Kommunikation und Virtualität verbunden, den Bedarf verändern in Büros, keine Frage. Dann liegt es aber jetzt tatsächlich an jedem Firmenkonzept, an jedem Arbeitsprozess, was das konkret bedeutet. Wir wissen, dass wenn man nicht das sauber managt und das nicht sauber einschätzt, dass eine Firma, die etwa nur noch entscheidet, wir bleiben virtuell, wir kommen gar nicht mehr zusammen, dass das Gefahr laufen kann, dass das sich sehr schnell verläuft, dass die Mitarbeiter an Bindung verlieren, dass sie nicht mehr richtig voneinander lernen können, dass sich das zerfasert im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes und dass dadurch eigentlich die Firma letztlich auseinanderdriftet und auseinandergeht. Das heißt, die Gefahr ist da auf der einen Seite, auf der anderen Seite ist natürlich die Gefahr, auch wenn man jemanden in die Firma zurückknüppelt, der gemerkt hat, es macht Sinn eigentlich auch, meine Pendelzeit zu reduzieren, mein Familienleben besser in Einklang zu bringen und so weiter. Es macht Sinn, eine Zeit lang zu Hause zu sein. Wenn man das ignoriert, verliert man vielleicht die Mitarbeiter. Also der Weg ist dazwischen und den muss man eben ausarbeiten. Und das ist für jede Firma letztlich ein persönliches Konzept, was man braucht. Und das heißt, Büro bleibt, aber es sieht anders aus.
Es scheint mir, dass sehr vieles an einer Bedürfnisklärung geht, also viel gemeinsam sprechen. Es gibt ganz verschiedene Möglichkeiten. Was ist in deiner Meinung nach die beste oder gibt es die überhaupt?
Ja, die beste ist wirklich die, dass man weiß, was man will. Also das war wirklich ganz absichtlich so gesagt, das ist kein Slogan. Das Problem ist, dass man oft Tendenz hat in unserer Zeit, wo alles so schnell gehen muss.
Und es verändert sich ja auch dauernd.
Richtig.
Ich weiß vielleicht, was ich heute will, aber morgen sieht das wieder
Gut,
anders aus.
das ist der Punkt. Also man muss irgendwelche Leitsterne finden, man muss sich orientieren, aber wenn man die nicht hat und wenn man einfach nur lostritt und schneller, wir müssen schneller sein, wir wissen zwar nicht wohin, aber wir sind schneller dort, das funktioniert so nicht. Dann läuft man Gefahr, sich zu verzetteln und sich zu verlieren. Das heißt, der Sinn muss wirklich sein am Kerngeschäft jetzt, und das ist ja der Orientierungspunkt, oder? Jede Firma hat ihr Kerngeschäft. Jede Firma weiß, was sie braucht, um den Wert zu erzeugen, um eben die Bilanzen positiv zu machen. Und diese Prozesse, also zum Beispiel Diversität, ja, also wenn das ein Key-Faktor ist für diese Firma, dass man aus der Diversität den ganzen Nutzen, die ganze Stärke zieht, dann muss man sich überlegen, was muss ich jetzt tun, welches Konzept muss ich entwickeln, dass jemand im Mix zu Hause arbeiten, vernetzt arbeiten, im Coworking arbeiten, im eigenen Büro arbeiten, wie ich das so vernetze, dass das ein System wird, was schlüssig ist, was die Mitarbeiter überzeugt, dass der Mitarbeiter kommen und vor allen Dingen auch bleiben. Das ist ja der schwierigste Punkt, dass Mitarbeiter bleiben. Und dass dann zusätzlich aber auch produktiv gearbeitet wird. Und da kann Büro schon helfen, weil Heimarbeit kann sehr unproduktiv sein auch, also von zu Hause zu arbeiten. Ein konzeptloses Coworking-Experiment kann auch nicht unbedingt immer den Erfolg bringen. Also da muss man dann eben wirklich konkret am Kerngeschäft sich orientiert ein Konzept erarbeiten. Für sich selbst, für die eigene Firma.
Auf Coworking kommen wir dann gerade nochmals zu sprechen. Ailo, du hast jetzt sehr oft genickt, als du Martin zugehört hast. Wo kannst du sagen, doch, da hatte er recht, was unsere Arbeit betrifft?
Ja, also ich habe vor allem genickt mit dem Gedanken, man muss schauen, was sind seine eigenen Ziele als Unternehmen. Und in unserem Fall war es ein Ziel, eine globale Community aufzubauen, damit wir mögliche Investments zum Beispiel auch in Nigerien oder in Asien finden können. Und da ist es natürlich für uns nicht wirklich realistisch, ein Büro zu haben. Also da war es für uns zum Beispiel anfangs klar, wir müssen hier komplett global, digital und remote arbeiten. Aber das ist natürlich, hat auch seine Schwierigkeiten. Also wir müssten dann zusammenkommen als Team, wahrscheinlich jetzt einmal in 3 Monaten irgendwo auf der Welt, damit wir uns auch mal sehen, weil diese Vernetztheit, dieses Gefühl von Community ist auch ganz wichtig. Man schafft viel online, aber trotzdem fehlt dann irgendwo dieser persönliche Touch. Und das fand ich einfach interessant, weil genau, also in unserem Fall unser Ziel ist, global zu sein und möglichst viele Leute zu inkludieren in dem, was wir machen. Da macht es Sinn, komplett remote zu sein.
Ihr seid ein Netzwerk, kann man sagen.
Wir sind ein Netzwerk, ja.
Und bei dem Weitwelten-Aspekt kann ich mir noch vorstellen, dass ein weiterer schwieriger Punkt die Zeitunterschiede natürlich auch sind.
Total, ja.
Wie schafft ihr es trotzdem, einen Nenner zu finden oder dieses Gemeinschaftsgefühl zu fördern, abgesehen von den 3-monatigen Treffen?
Also was wir gefunden haben, das ganz gut funktioniert, sind so tägliche Office Hours oder wir nennen die halt For the Win Cafés. Wir haben so 16:30 Uhr Europazeit. Jeden Tag einer von der Community drinnen und sie sitzen im Discord, also es ist eine Art Slack oder Online-Tool, wo man halt sprechen kann. Sie sitzen dort und ja, zum Beispiel donnerstags gibt es NFT und Art und Kunst und wir reden halt mal alle und quatschen ein bisschen und nicht über die Arbeit und haben einfach einen Spaß. Und das bringt ein bisschen zumindest dieses Gefühl von loose Connections, die man sonst im Büro oder in einem Coworking Space findet.
Lukas, Full Node. Du hast ganzen Haufen Beispiele genannt. Am besten hat mir natürlich das Klasse gefallen, wie ihr das vor Ort habt. Jetzt bei euch, Enabling Collaboration, was ist so das ist der Übertitel dieser Session jetzt zu diesem Thema, was ist von euch aus so die Kernmessage? Was würdest du anderen sagen, die sagen, hey, das finde ich toll, das möchte ich auch machen, wo du sagst, hey, aber achte dich echt auf, sagen wir, diese 3 Dinge, das ist so the core, das ist ganz wichtig, wenn man sowas wie Full Node starten möchte.
Ja, ich denke, es ist wichtig, dass man wirklich seine Stakeholder definiert und also mit wem will man kollaborieren. Das sind auch Sachen, die vielleicht nicht so nahe liegen wie jetzt, es sind nicht nur andere Startups, es sind vielleicht auch Investoren, es sind Medien, es ist staatliche Komponenten, dass man da wirklich schaut, wer ist da relevant und dass man irgendwie einen Zugang findet, dass man da die zusammenbringen kann durch Events, durch Podcasts und so weiter. Und dann auch vielleicht im Internen, also wenn man irgendwie kollaboriert miteinander. Ich glaube, da stimme ich auch zu, dass das quasi jetzt so ein bisschen wieder so ein Findungsprozess sein wird und dass wahrscheinlich viel in so ein hybrides Modell gehen wird. Das hat Viele haben quasi Blut geleckt, die haben gemerkt, Remote hat seine Vorteile, aber hat halt auch seine Nachteile und dass irgendwie das zusammengefunden werden muss und das ist dann für jedes Unternehmen so ein bisschen ein anderer Punkt, wo dann das Optimum ist. Und da ist, finde ich, wichtig, wenn man in so einem Hybridmodell ist, dass man schaut, dass Leute, die dann remote sind, quasi mitgenommen werden, weil die, was wir gemacht haben, wir sind schon sehr lange hybrid unterwegs, das heißt, wir bieten das einen Hub an, aber wir zwingen niemanden da zu sein, wir geben quasi Gründe da zu sein, quasi um das angenehmer zu machen, aber wenn man remote ist und man hat ein Meeting und das ist halt ein Zoom-Meeting, dann ist es nicht so, dass jetzt Leute irgendwo im Meetingraum zusammensitzen und dann irgendwie die extern zugeschaltet werden, weil das kreiert dann direkt so eine Zweiklassengesellschaft und dass man da wirklich schaut, wenn man ein Meeting hat, wo Externe dabei sind, alle gehen irgendwie in der Telebox, alle wählen sich alleine ein und dass man da nicht irgendwie versucht, den einen so zu behandeln und den anderen so, weil wenn man dann, sonst funktioniert das nicht und dann die remote sind, speziell das Top-Talent, das wird sich dann ein Unternehmen suchen, wo das eher Richtung Remote ausgelegt ist.
Kennen wir wahrscheinlich alle so eine Situation. Kannst du dein Mikro bitte ausmachen, so im selben Raum? Das ist etwas, was du sagst, hey, das haben wir so ein bisschen den Dreh draußen. Was gibt es aber sonst, was noch schwierig ist, wo du siehst, hey, das hat noch Potenzial, da haben wir doch noch unsere Schwierigkeiten mit?
Also das Schwierigste, wenn Leute remote sind, ist immer, dass man quasi diese psychologische Sicherheit miteinander hat, weil die Kreativität und Innovation entsteht immer, wenn sich Leute streiten, wenn unterschiedliche Meinungen, Diversität zusammenkommt. Und das geht nur, wenn man sich wirklich nach dem Streiten auch wieder versteht und nicht der eine den anderen dominiert und dann der andere nichts mehr sagt das nächste Mal und seine Ideen nicht mehr teilt. Und das geht halt nur aus meiner Sicht, wenn man irgendwie, klar kann man irgendwelche digitalen Kaffeekränzchen machen und so weiter, aber quasi im physischen Raum zu sein, das hilft so viel mehr. Und das ist halt durch Retreats, durch irgendwie mal zusammen irgendwo hinzugehen oder zusammen irgendwie sich auf eine Konferenz zu treffen oder so, das einfach muss, sonst.
Also da würde ich dann noch nachhaken. Ich würde sagen, wenn wir uns so ein Gedankenexperiment machen, oder? Und wir sollen in wenig Zeit irgendein gemeinsames Werk erstellen. Und wir setzen uns alle unter eine Kiste und haben nur ein kleines Loch zur Verfügung und vielleicht das Handy noch, um miteinander zu reden. Da wird man unglaublich lange brauchen, um sich abzustimmen. Und ich glaube, das muss man also immer im Auge behalten. Es gibt eben Prozesse, die sind hochstrukturiert. Zum Beispiel, wenn man sich einen Weg gefunden hat, dann kann man das sehr leicht delegieren und verteilen und in wenigen Momenten abstimmen aufeinander, weil dann reicht das Telefon, reicht das Videophon oder irgendwie der Computer oder was auch immer. Aber wenn man in solchen Neufindungsprozessen ist, sei es jetzt sozial, das Team muss ja erstmal die gleiche Sprache finden, also die gleiche Kultur haben miteinander, dass man sich lesen kann, oder? Wenn es aber auch darum geht, eben in schneller Folge abzugleichen, Ideen durchzuchecken, dann ist der Mensch derartig vielschichtiger Kommunikator, dass das heutzutage durch die Technik eigentlich noch meistens nicht gut abgedeckt ist. Es gibt zwar da tolle Forschung in die Richtung, dass man das verstärkt, aber es ist da schon effektiver, wenn man sich im Raum trifft. Und eben sei es in einem Coworking Space oder in einem Hotel oder wo auch immer, wo ihr euch dann trefft. Aber ich bin sicher, das ist der effizienteste Weg, im 3D immer noch dann was auszuarbeiten. Das muss aber nicht 100% der Zeit sein natürlich. Und da ist dann der Punkt. Manche haben einen kurzen Moment lange Kreativphase und können dann 3 Monate lang ihre Arbeiten runterschaffen, oder? Und andere haben halt laufend solche Phasen und müssen viel öfter miteinander. Und daran entscheidet sich dann, wie viel man im Raum miteinander teilt oder wie viel man remote gehen kann, hätte ich gesagt.
Ich denke, da können wir alle zustimmen, zumindest wir hier auf der Bühne. Wir werden dann natürlich noch auf euch bald zu sprechen kommen, was für Fragen das ihr habt, was für Inputs, was vielleicht auch für Erfahrungen, das ihr mitbringt und mit uns hier vorne teilen könnt. Wir haben es vorhin noch gehört, Enabling Collaboration bedeutet jetzt nicht nur von den Räumlichkeiten her, diese Zusammenarbeit, wir haben das Conti-System von dir gehört, Ayla, bei den DAOs sieht das ähnlich aus. Dieser ganze Ökosystem-Gedanke, wenn es um Kollaborationen geht, was ist dabei speziell wichtig?
Also bei uns ist es jetzt so, dass wir unser Hauptinteresse ist quasi dieses intelligente Konto zu verbreiten und dass das quasi der Standard wird. Und wir werden das nicht alleine machen können. Deswegen machen wir auch alles, was wir machen, jeden Code, den wir schreiben, machen wir Open Source, unter einer Open Source Lizenz, einfach damit andere das nehmen können, darauf aufbauen, da Innovation betreiben können. Und ich glaube, das ist Open Source, speziell im Web3 Blockchain-Bereich, ist was essentiell ist, weil das ermöglicht, quasi ohne jemanden fragen zu müssen, auf deren Ideen aufzubauen und quasi kollaborieren, ohne dass jetzt das aktiv erzwungen werden muss, sondern dass das mehr organisch kommt, dass man, wir haben schon Leute gehabt, die irgendwelche Contributions zu unserem Code gemacht haben, die kannten wir nicht mal. Und dann gab es auch Leute, die haben was gemacht, die haben was gebaut und die arbeiten jetzt für uns, weil die einfach so eine gute Qualität gemacht haben. Und da verschwinden auch so ein bisschen die Grenzen zwischen, was ist jetzt intern, was ist extern. Und die Kollaboration ist nicht nur in deinem Team, in deinem Department, sondern die ist quasi mit jedem auf der Welt potenziell, der Interesse hat, irgendwie teilzunehmen und so. Ja.
Also das Geflecht von den Stakeholdern wird immer komplexer. Wie behält man da denn die Kontrolle?
Tooling, gutes Tooling, vor allem gut dokumentieren, was man macht. Also das merken wir, um asynchron zu arbeiten, muss man deutlich genauer sein in Meetings aufnehmen, sie immer hochladen, teilen, Meeting Notes nehmen, dokumentieren, warum man was gemacht hat und wie. Das ist ganz wichtig. Was du gesagt hast, Lukas, zu psychologischer Sicherheit, super wichtig. Also dass dieses Gefühl von Team und man darf und kann und sollte sogar was sagen, wenn man bei was nicht zustimmt. Ich wollte auch zu dem Ökosystem was sagen und zum Kollaborieren. Also ich finde es super spannend mit DAOs zum Beispiel, wie wir also zu den weicheren Grenzen zwischen Unternehmen oder Organisationen, weil wir zum Beispiel waren anfangs von unserem Vorgehen auch sehr involviert und sind noch sehr involviert bei Bankless DAO, und das ist eine große Media DAO, und haben die gleichen Probleme gehabt wie andere, die auch eine Venture DAO aufbauen wollten. Wir haben die gleichen Legal-Fragen gehabt, wir haben die gleichen Fragen gehabt, in welchem Land können wir diese Struktur gründen. Und somit haben wir gemeinsame Calls mit Leuten über die ganze Welt gemacht. Und irgendwann sind wir drauf gekommen, ja, wir brauchen eigentlich beide Education. Und dann haben wir zum Beispiel ein Education-Programm gegründet und das für die Mitglieder von Bankless und Fight Club gemacht. Und ich fand das halt als Beispiel super spannend, weil es also normal in der echten Welt würde man halt zu einem anderen Unternehmen gehen, man würde sich gegenüber sitzen und irgendwie so, ja, wir sind A und wir sind B und wie machen wir das? Und das könnte 3 Monate dauern. Und das war irgendwie einfach komplett organisches Herausfinden von Needs und Zusammenarbeiten. Und das finde ich sehr spannend, diese Offenheit und Transparenz, das erlaubt sehr viel. Also ich hoffe, das ist jetzt nicht zu weit von deiner Frage. Aber
Nein, überhaupt nicht. Was mich hierbei interessiert ist, Martin, du hast es vorhin gesagt, hey, Geschäfte am besten immer noch Handschlag. Ich meine auch, diese Diskrepanz ist, ja, aber so in Person, ne? Und diese Diskrepanz, also ich meine, von meinem Beispiel jetzt auszugehen, gestern war ich Kirschen lesen. Und da war ich mit ganz vielen Landwirten vor Ort und die haben mir erklärt, dass ein Handschlag mehr Bedeutung hat als eine Unterschrift, geschweige denn eine digitale Unterschrift. Jetzt in eurem Beispiel, Ayla, wie schafft ihr es, und auch bei dir, Lukas, wie schafft ihr diese Vertrauensbasis mit Menschen, mit denen ihr vielleicht nur geschrieben habt, die für euch gearbeitet habt, ihr habt die Arbeit gesehen, habt gefunden, ja okay, wie schafft man da das Vertrauen auch?
Ja, ich meine, es gibt ja verschiedene Wege, wie man jetzt irgendwie kollaborieren kann. Eins ist irgendwie so ein bisschen physisch, wenn man jetzt zusammen ein Seil zieht, das ist so quasi extrem physisch, und da gibt es so ein bisschen die soziale Kollaboration. Das heißt, man hat irgendwie einen Social Contract, den man erfüllen will, und da gibt es irgendwie die rechtliche Koordination mit einem Legal Contract. Und was halt im Blockchain-Bereich interessant ist, dass du da quasi über Smart Contracts das abbildet oder über ein Consensus-Protokoll, und dass es eigentlich quasi gar kein Vertrauen braucht, also nicht Vertrauen ins Rechtssystem, nicht Vertrauen in den sozialen, in den Social Contract, sondern das Vertrauen wird durch den Code, der darunter liegt, ermöglicht. Und das heißt, wenn ich jetzt teilnehme an einem Netzwerk, wenn ich ein Bitcoin-Miner bin, ich brauche nicht vertrauen, dass wenn ich die Leistung erbringe, dass ich dann meine Rewards kriege. Das ist einfach durch den Code so gegeben, erzwungen. Und natürlich braucht man quasi das Vertrauen in Code und da ist dann wichtig, dass das Ganze geordnet ist, dass da viele Augen drauf schauen, dass es Open Source ist, dass nicht irgendwas Verstecktes ist. Aber echt, das ist genau das Schöne am Ganzen, dass es quasi trustless ist, dass man koordinieren kann, ohne irgendwo am System oder an einer zentralen Einheit zu vertrauen.
Liebes Publikum, Eile, wolltest
Nee,
du
nee.
was sagen? Okay. Liebes Publikum, eure Fragen, eure Expertise, eure Inputs sind gefragt. Ich weiß jetzt gerade nicht, wo das Mikro ist. Oder? Wunderbar, super. Der Stefan würde zu euch kommen mit dem Mikrofon für allfällige Fragen. Gebt doch ganz kurz einfach ein Zeichen.
Martin, du hast ganz am Anfang gesagt, dass die Unternehmen müssen wissen, was sie wollen. Irgend so einen Satz hast du gesagt. Wie hilfst du dann, oder wo fängt man da an, um zu wissen, was man will?
Guter Punkt. Eine Strategie ist nur so gut wie die Ziele, die man hat. Das heißt, der Punkt ist ja, um irgendwo hinzukommen, muss man erstmal Ziele setzen, oder? Man muss Ziele definieren. Und als Firma macht es Sinn, natürlich die Ziele an dem Geschäftszweck, an dem man sich orientiert, von dem aus abzuleiten. Und das kann dann eben von dort weg dann schrittweise, ein Stück weit organisatorisch erstmal natürlich, muss das geklärt werden. Unser Aufgabenbereich ist jetzt nicht, dass wir Organisationsentwickler wären oder so, aber eine Organisation weiß zum Teil ja schon sehr gut, wie sie organisiert ist an sich. Das Problem ist, wenn es dann sich diese Organisation mit Veränderungen auseinandersetzen muss, wie zum Beispiel nach Covid oder auch schlichtweg, weil man gekauft wurde oder weil der Markt sich ändert und man sich intern neu aufstellen muss, dass man sich dann überlegen muss, wie kann ich jetzt helfen, räumlich, technisch auch, gerade jetzt, also die ganze Technologie wird natürlich immer wichtiger, das so auszurichten, dass ich am Ende meinen Zielen gerecht werde. Das heißt, die Ziele sind eigentlich der Leitstern, oder? Und die muss man aber auch sauber formulieren. Wenn man so generisch arbeitet, hilft das nicht viel, weil dann hat man zwar den Punkt abgehakt, Ziele formuliert, aber sie helfen nicht. Also sie müssen so genau sein, dass die Firma dass jeder in der Firma was damit anfangen kann. Und das ist der erste Teil der Arbeit. Der zweite Teil ist dann, sich zu überlegen, wie kann man die Ziele umsetzen und welchen Teil kann Raum, kann Technik, kann gerade auch IT, also da ist sehr viel natürlich IT heute immer im Spiel, unterstützen.
Dankeschön, ich hoffe, die Frage ist beantwortet. Super. Gibt es noch weitere Fragen oder auch von euch aus Erfahrungen, die ihr gemacht habt, die passen hier in die Runde, diese zu teilen?
Ich hätte eine Frage an Ayla.
Unbedingt, unbedingt.
Und zwar, seid ihr Unternehmen, Einzelunternehmen allesamt oder wie seid ihr organisiert?
Das ist eine gute Frage. Also wir sind ein Verein in der Schweiz und wir haben einen GmbH für die For-Profit-Aktivitäten. Also wir haben den Verein und dann unsere Teilnehmer sind Mitglieder von dem Verein, aber eigentlich alles läuft über Blockchain, also wird über Blockchain laufen. Also ja, genau. Also eigentlich ist es wie eine digitale Genossenschaft, kann man sagen.
Arbeitet ihr gemeinsam oder habt ihr da?
Nee.
Nein.
Nee.
Von der Immobilie habe ich zuerst gewartet, dass Sie wieder das Feld aufmachen zu Eisler. Mich interessiert das nämlich auch. Sind dann diese Leute in der Genossenschaft sind quasi daran beteiligt? Oder, also ich finde es wahnsinnig toll, diese Diversität zu unterstützen. Es leuchtet mir auch ein, dass das auch ökonomisch Sinn macht, weil diversere Teams oft auch Lösungen entwickeln, die mehr Leute ansprechen quasi. Also so wird im engelsächsischen Raum zumindest argumentiert. Ihr seid ja jetzt ein Kernteam und ihr habt diese Leute, die in diesem DAO quasi ihr Netzwerk oder ihr Wissen zur Verfügung stellen. Also warum machen die das? Oder ich war vorher kurz auf der Webseite und ich habe das mit diesem Minten und dem, was die da auch machen, und ich habe es einfach nicht kapiert. Vielleicht könntest du mal kurz erklären.
Ja, es ist tatsächlich neu und speziell. Also es ist, warum machen Sie das? Das war die erste Frage. Einerseits ist es natürlich die Mission, was wir vorhaben, dass es wichtig ist und dass es auch Richtung Investments sehr rentabel ist, aber auch gut ist für die Gesellschaft und für das Ökosystem. Das andere ist, man kann mit seiner Zeit oder mit seinem Geld eben Tokens kaufen, die eben das Mitbestimmen in dieser Organisation halt ermöglichen. Und dieses Mitbestimmen kann sehr interessant sein. Also wenn man zum Beispiel jetzt hier reinkommt als Venture Capital Firma zum Beispiel und sagt, hey, ich finde das cool, wir wollen auch irgendwie mehr Diversität im Ökosystem, wir wollen auch mitmachen da mit euch, wir wollen auch Education, weil wir merken, wir brauchen mehr Talent, mehr diverseres Talent, dann kaufen sie halt Tokens ein oder kaufen das NFT in dem Fall gerade und können mitbestimmen und sagen, hey, können auch Proposals machen. Also zum Beispiel, wenn wir in unserem Treasury, das ist jetzt dahergeholt, aber 200.000 haben, könnten Sie sagen, wir würden jetzt vorschlagen, wir geben hier 10.000 Franken aus für ein Event in Zürich und fördern das Thema Diversität in Startups zum Beispiel. Und dann könnten wir alle als Mitglieder das uns anschauen gemeinsam und je nachdem, wer in der Gruppe ist, kann sagen, okay, das macht Sinn, das fördert unser Zweck, es fördert uns als Gruppe, als Mitglieder, als Organisation und eben schauen. Und je nachdem, welche Interessen in dieser Gruppe sind und wie stark, entscheidet im Endeffekt, was gemacht wird. Hat das die Frage beantwortet?
So kritisch heute. Aber das Main Goal von euch ist quasi durch Diversität mehr Geld zu verdienen oder die Diversität zu fördern als Verein? Also ist das so gemeinnützig oder ist das Money? Oder ist es beides?
Das ist halt eben super spannend, es ist beides. Also wir sind Verein, aber wir wollen natürlich auch als Verein andere Organisationen darunter gründen, wo wir andere Sachen, Aktivitäten vielleicht zum Beispiel for Profit machen können, wo die Gelder zum Teil dann auch in den Verein reinfließen und halt diese Aktivitäten, die wir als Verein gemeinnützig machen wollen, dann natürlich auch finanzieren. Und da ist es ein bisschen wie in einer Genossenschaft. Es hat dann einfach einen Mehrwert, einen Teil in diesem Verein zu haben als Mitglied, weil man halt vielleicht teilnehmen kann an Events oder irgendeinen anderen Wert bekommt als Mitglied.
Wenn ich jetzt mit euch zusammenarbeiten möchte oder ich würde gerne für euch arbeiten, also du hast jetzt einerseits gesagt, hey, man hat Mitentscheidung, also das ist ganz klar eine Möglichkeit, die Leute an Bord zu holen, Enabling Collaborations. Was für weitere Möglichkeiten gibt es bei euch, um diese Enabling Collaboration zu gewährleisten?
Also das ist eigentlich, was ich super cool finde bei DAOs. Im Endeffekt ist mehr oder weniger alles möglich. Wir sind extrem flexibel. Alles, was man sich ausdenken kann, kann man vorschlagen und wir können mit unseren Mitgliedern ausdiskutieren, oft auch im offenen Forum. Also das ist auch interessant generell bei DAOs, oft diese sehr tiefen, wie sagt man, kontroverse Diskussionen werden halt in der Öffentlichkeit geführt und man sieht als Outsider, was eigentlich besprochen wird und wie die Mitglieder mit dem Thema umgehen. Wir haben es im Moment teilweise diese Sachen noch geschlossen, weil wir eben als kleines Gründerteam gestartet haben, aber das wird immer mehr und mehr aufgemacht, je nachdem, wie viele Mitglieder dazukommen und haben eigentlich schon vor, dass alle Diskussionen in Zukunft im offenen Forum geführt werden. Das heißt, wenn jetzt jemand, eine Firma zu uns kommt und sagt, wir möchten eine Partnerschaft, dann würde das möglicherweise im offenen Forum stehen. Und da gab es einen Fall letztes Jahr bei einer Bank zum Beispiel. Ich weiß jetzt nicht mehr genau, welche Bank, es war eine französische, die wollten eine Partnerschaft mit einer DeFi-DAO, also dezentralisierte Finanz. Und weil eben diese DAO nur über dieses Forum funktioniert, ist diese Bank zu diesem Forum gegangen und hat einen Proposal geschrieben im öffentlichen Forum, wir möchten mit euch arbeiten und würden so und so viel, also es war im Millionenbereich, an euch geben im Gegensatz für das. Und ja, also das finde ich halt, das ist schon eine krasse Veränderung der Ansatz, wie man eine Partnerschaft oder Firmen führt.
Eigentlich ist die Zeit um. Eine letzte Frage noch. Nee, das liegt nicht an dir, da bin ich eigentlich für verantwortlich. Also wir haben jetzt sehr verschiedene Arbeitsmodelle, Arbeitsmöglichkeiten gehört. Was ich im Speziellen oft höre, wenn es um die Thematik Blockchain, DAOs geht, ist wie so, hey, mega spannend, mega interessant, aber irgendwie, ich kapiere es ganz doch noch nicht. Auch eben, die Frage von dir auch war so, wie jetzt genau? Klar, ihr habt Leute, die kommen zu euch von alleine. Ich meine, es ist auch sehr attraktiv für Menschen, die sich total in dem auskennen, aber wie kann man aber auch eure Arbeitsweisen mehr enablen? Was für Übersetzungsarbeit macht ihr hier? Weil einerseits scheint mir die Hemmschwelle, also die Gestaltungsmöglichkeit und die Mitmach-Hemmschwelle eigentlich sehr nieder und trotzdem aber scheint mir die Komplexität dann wiederum eine sehr hohe Mauer zu sein. Wie schafft ihr da, oder seid ihr da auch noch am Herausfinden?
Also Lukas kann bestimmt auch was sagen. Ich kann nur sagen, Education ist ein super wichtiges Thema für uns und wir machen noch nicht genug, aber es muss super viel Education und Erklärung geben. Und das andere ist User Experience, also möglichst, dass die Tools so einfach wie möglich zu nutzen sind und dass eigentlich das ganze Thema Blockchain, DAOs und NFTs nicht mehr so sichtbar sein muss. Und also dass es einfach mehr ist wie im Web agieren für die Leute. Aber Education ist auch wichtig, weil sonst, wenn man nicht weiß, was passiert, ist eigentlich dieses dezentralisierte Ansatz ist super wichtig und wenn die Tools zu einfach sind, dann merken die Nutzer gar nicht, warum das eine anders ist als Web 2 und zentralisiert. Aber vielleicht kannst du da noch kurz was sagen.
Ja, ich meine, wir sind im Moment schon noch quasi im Stadium wie ein Computer, der den ganzen Raum erfüllt und der nur von sehr technischen Leuten bedient werden kann. Und wie jede Technologie, das ganze Potenzial wird erst erreicht, wenn das zugänglicher wird, wenn das einfacher zu verstehen wird, wenn das auch nicht nur für den angelsächsischen Raum passt, sondern im Moment ist halt, wenn du nicht Englisch sprichst, hast du Pech gehabt, kannst du mit keiner DAO interagieren, kannst du in keinem Forum sprechen, da müssen wir auf vielen Wegen das Ganze zugänglicher machen, aber ich denke schon, heute gibt es quasi sehr viele Wege, wie man jetzt, auch wenn man jetzt nicht sehr technisch ist oder auch die ganze Blockchain-Thematik nicht in der Gänze versteht, wie man da quasi teilnehmen kann im Ganzen. Wir haben einen in unserer Community, der macht halt irgendwelche Designs und witzigen Bilder und so weiter und verbreitet so ein bisschen oder klärt die Leute über den Nutzen von unserem Produkt auf, weniger über das Technische, wie das funktioniert und der nimmt da genauso teil wie jemand, der einen Pull-Request auf GitHub macht und da technisch beiträgt. Also da kann auch jeder schauen, was sind seine Stärken, ist es Community Management, ist es Design, ist es schöne Präsentationen machen und schauen, was braucht quasi die Organisation, die DAO, das Projekt und kann auch, ich meine, da kann man auch offen drüber reden, fast jede Discord, jeder Forum hat irgendwo einen Kanal, der heißt so Contribute und dann kann man da schauen, ich habe die und die Stärken, was kann ich machen oder das ist interessant, aber ich weiß nicht, wie ich beitragen kann.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, Martin, Ayla und Lukas.
Danke.
I'm very happy to welcome on stage for the next input Hangyang Wang. Maybe you know her better under her English name Una. She's an ETH PhD student and the main developer of the first No One's One prototype, a self-owned house based on the blockchain technology. And maybe you have spotted it, it's right there in the corner. You're going to have the chance to take a look inside of it after the next input and the next discussion round. And as well, I'm happy to welcome here on stage Jens Hunhewitz. He's also on the ETH PhD student, and he's the co-developer of No One's One. I was quite looking where they are, but here you are. Here we go.
Hello everyone, my name is Hong Yang and you can call me Una. I'm currently the project lead of No One's One at ETH.
Yeah, and I'm Jens Hunewitz. I used to be Una's supervisor. Now I'm her collaborator. I'm also working on No One's One. So I'll start off the presentation. Grüezi miteinander. Very happy that we have such a big audience, and I hope you find our idea interesting. It's one of our projects we are working on at ETH at the Chair of Innovative and Industrial Construction. So it's one of our more futuristic projects, but nevertheless it opens up a lot of very interesting questions, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion afterwards. So why blockchain? We are from ETH, so I'll start this off with what is blockchain, a very technical description. No, I'm just joking. But I quickly want to introduce to you why we think blockchain is actually the right technology for our project. I mean, that's not always so obvious in all the projects out there. So in a very simple sense, blockchain is a database or an accounting system that saves transactions in a very interesting way, that gives us some properties that are fascinating and we can exploit for our project. So back in the days, you had accounting books, so people were writing down transactions in the accounting book so they know the final state of the whatever you want to know, maybe the balance of your business in the end. So blockchain clusters transactions and puts them in a block, and then there is the next block with the next transaction. It's appended to the first one, and this is a never-ending process that's running on a computer. And by sequentially saving this in this manner, you get a set of very interesting properties because these blocks are cryptographically connected. So if you slightly change only certain parameters for transactions in one block, it changes all the previous blocks and you immediately notice the difference. So and the interesting part comes when you run this in a network of peer-to-peer nodes where everyone has the same copy of the blockchain, you immediately spot if someone changed one version of the blockchain. So you can detect fraud. And then there is a lot of interesting mechanisms going on how you add new transactions, and I'm not going too much into detail there, but the essence what you get is a system that shifts trust to the technical system in terms of transaction execution. So instead of having a counterparty trust you need to do, or trusting an intermediary, the technical system takes care of this trust. And in addition, you can add a layer of logic and automation to interact with these transactions, and often people talk about these unstoppable processes and incentives. So the magic word there is smart contract. That's the smart contract of No One's One over there, the house. So basically, it encodes the workflow, which interactions with the transactions of No One's One are allowed and which are possible. So we can design how these systems work, and you have a lot of freedom to do that. And the second thing you can do is, besides workflows, is tokens with smart contracts. There are a lot of NFTs. We heard about NFTs. So basically, an NFT is also a smart contract that has certain properties. So you can give a token a certain property by coding. For example, you have a stable coin, every coin's the same, and it's pegged to the US dollar. That's the property of that token. Or you have an NFT, every token is unique and is exchangeable. So you also program that properties of the tokens. So with all this background, what you can do with blockchain, there is something very interesting emerging that was not possible before. And that is that smart contracts as a special type of account that combine logic and funds at the same time enables cyber-physical integration of machines in our economy. So the blockchain, because there are no intermediaries or no counterparties, doesn't distinguish between a human and a machine. So machines can interact with you and transact with you. They can hold funds. And that's a very interesting new opportunity or at this possibility. And one idea how this can be used is Nature to Zero. There is an article from Trent McGonaghy who described this, where the idea is that as nature, you can give infrastructure the properties, certain interaction properties for the service they provide, and they just are as nature, and you can interact with them. So it's the cybernetic ideal of a DAO, an engineered society with humans at the edge. So I got very interested in this topic early on. The first art project I knew that was proposing this concept were the Plantoids of Primavera di Filippi. So basically you could feed them Bitcoin and they got richer. Besides that, there was not much more you can do with them, but it was nevertheless interesting that the Plantoids had an address. Then the second prototype that I actually encountered was from the Decentrum. When I first interacted with them back in the days at Trust Square, I saw the satellite. It's over there. Basically, it's traveling the world. It's getting richer. People can pay it for traveling, right? You can talk more to the Decentrum if you want to know more about the satellite. And then I also got to know that they have an additional project called No One's One, a self-owning house, which was in a conceptual stage back then. And I got in contact with them. I thought that was a very interesting idea to give a house a self-ownership. And I launched a master thesis on that topic, and I found Una as a student working on that. And we got a long way until then, and Una will explain you more about the project now.
So when I first saw the master thesis No One's One, my initial reaction was no. This is too crazy for me. I was an architect and I studied the integrated building system, very much focused on building energy analysis, envelope, and the system, how the system works of buildings. And when I saw No One's One, then I think about it twice. I couldn't resist that is such an interesting and provocative idea that I find it as could be a different path to what we have before in architecture also. Because in building, we have data privacy problems with smart buildings, and all the platforms blockchain might provide an alternative idea. So with my active expertise in architecture, I thought of building a first prototype, No One's One, and in full scale. That was very cold 2 months in Decentrum's basement that we built the first prototype. We wanted to use minimum viable prototype methodology. So to minimize the functionality and the operation, we define it as a meditation space and only allow for single user. Well, I'm also a long-term meditation practitioner, so that idea kind of popped in my head immediately. However, we also choose meditation as the functionality also to minimize the operation of it, because people literally just sit in it and without sweating, we don't need to deal with cleaning or anything. So we want to build a minimum viable prototype. And then, while also maximizing the future adaptability and self-sufficiency, so we had modular construction built on wood, and then put it on wheels, so it is mobile, that it can roll to the gallery, and the self-sustaining energy system with solar battery. But also, we currently build an alternative system that it can plug into the grid. And then we think further about the technical framework of this prototype. We defined 5 elements. They are the front end, basically the website that we built, and then the actors, the user actions, and then the No One's One shell itself, how to build it, what are the IoT system inside, and what's the functionality of the shell of the envelope itself. And then there's the back end, which is basically the IoT system with a lot of sensors, actuators, and Raspberry Pi on the back end that could push status of the house onto the blockchain. And then, of course, the decentralized ledger technology, the blockchain that we connect to and store all the important data. And then we defined all the technology that we're using and also the languages and start building the prototype. I will not showcase every part of the prototype since the prototype's right there and you can try out in the next break, but I will showcase a little bit of the system behind. That is, we're kind of exciting because we're also engineers. I had a lot of fun tinkling around with all these elements. And then I will show you a user experience video of No One's One to have a good grasp of how you would interact with the space. So basically, you can go on the website and type in a username and connect it with your MetaMask, and you will get a generated QR code. With this QR code, you will go to scan at the prototype, and the transaction will be sent to the blockchain. And once the transaction is secured, the door will turn green, and you will guaranteed around 1 minute meditation space. And then there's a countdown started on the back end, and it will buzz you out, and door will open before you exit. And then when the exit is confirmed, the transaction is confirmed again on the blockchain. It's a very simple workflow of the prototype currently, and you can try it out. And we simplify the workflow here so that you don't need to register. You can just enter with an iPad, just in case that you don't have MetaMask as a wallet. Huh? Yeah, at the moment, only with MetaMask, yes. And then I will introduce you a little bit that beyond just No One's One, our current research thinking, that it is not beyond the concept No One's One, but it's beyond only a self-owning house. So we want to apply this idea of self-owning entities, that No One's One can own itself, with blockchain governments, the DAO idea that was presented and discussed earlier, how we want to see how the combination can be in the built environment. So we kind of roughly have an idea of decentralized autonomous space, which we think that we imagine a digital governance coordinated real community, that administrative work could be reduced by automated processes, trust generated by process transparency, equity balanced by ownership redistribution, and participation encouraged by incentive alignment, rent-seeking intermediaries substituted by non-rent-seeking entities. And with this, I will give you another concept video of No One's One that guide you to the prototype and beyond the idea of prototype to a network of an ecosystem. There's no sound to this. There actually is sound. Can I play the sound of the video? This video was produced by an animator who, when we exhibited at World Economy Forum, ETH Pavilion, they want to communicate the idea of No One's One to everyone. So this is a really high-level concept video that introduces you the idea of No One's One as a self-owning space, and beyond that, how it can be embedded in an ecosystem of connected things. Where's the music?
Yeah. Makes it more dramatic without music.
Okay. It's a music not playing.
So that's the future idea, that then the funds that the house earns can be spent for maintenance and operation of the house. So it's self-sustaining. For now, it just gets richer. Our main research topic is to investigate how to spend money that is owned by a house, and that's not an easy task. But there are approaches that we're exploring. Yeah. And in fact, it's really owned by the house. So we code it in a way that no one can access it, even not we as developers. It's there at the moment running on the testnet, so we don't care when it gets richer. But I mean, it shows that the concept works, right? That if you throw away the private keys of the house and it earns money, it gets richer and no one can access it. So it's really owned by the house.
Thank you for the narrative. So I will end the presentation roughly around here. I have some closing remarks to conclude what is really the idea that we're trying to convey here. Is that first, blockchain enables machine self-ownership and machine participation, and house is a living machine, and space is ubiquitous living environment. And the future of building and spaces, we believe, is a collaborative cyber-physical integrated environment for both human and autonomous machine agents. And in concurrent with the whole topic of the gallery, and also to kick off the next session of discussion, I would like to end with a question for everyone. If the future of work is DAO, is a future of working environment no one's one, or decentralized autonomous space? And really looking forward for the discussion in the next panel. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now, please, a warm welcome. Yes, come on over, that's all right. Oh, we need one more chair then. Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so we have here Lukas Amacher, Chief Curator at Dialectic. Dialectic is a crypto venture fund. Then we have here Dr. Marlene Wenger. She's from Elementum.art. Curator, researcher in the field of exhibition presentation of post-digital art, artistic practices in physical and also virtual spaces. And we have Ralph Horath, co-founder of the Next Generation Village. This is also a prototype village of the future, which will serve as a living laboratory for alternative socio-economy systems and technological innovations. Here we go. Thank you very much, everybody here and around. It's getting bigger and bigger with each session. So first of all, I'd love to hear more about your work, Luke, because we heard a lot about now Una and Jens' work. How's it in your case, in a few sentences?
Thank you very much for the introduction. I work at Dialectic. Dialectic is a venture capital fund that invests mainly in crypto-related projects. I run One of One, which is our NFT collection. We have a collection of about 500 odd NFTs that is worth roughly $30 million, and we kind of participate in various projects around those NFTs, work with the communities that create those NFTs. Our NFT collection is sorted into various genres. So we have an art part, we have a metaverse part, which is kind of the collection of gaming assets and PFPs and kind of this metaverse identity thing. And then we have a culture guild that collects other various items. We also play with physicals. So for example, we own Biggie Smalls Coney crown. I don't know who of you remembers this photo shoot of Biggie Smalls with the crown on top. And then we tokenized it, so we're playing around with tokenized culture, basically.
I like it that you say you play around. All right.
Yeah, it is. That's reality.
We're going to come back to that. Marlene Wenger, can you tell us a bit more about your work?
So I basically work as a curator for a marketplace for digital art, which is called Elementum.art. And what I do there is very much like the work of what you would imagine a classical curator does, like do a selection of interesting positions that then are featured on the platform, and also to create the discourse around it, to organize events and do podcasts or do different kind of interactions and education also around the topic. Our focus is, I would say, more on the art aspect of NFTs. So we really are focusing on collecting digital art and try, like, what is, for me, what is important or interesting is to see the different aspects, or also how artists are starting to work with the blockchain more conceptually, or maybe on the not so much maybe in the speculative place that these bigger platforms are located, like OpenSea or Foundation, but to see what is happening on the fringes of this field. And for me personally, what I find interesting as a curator is that this technology, the NFT technology, brought a lot of attention and visibility to digital art that has been existing or has existed for a very long time, of course. But with this technology, certainly we have this hype, suddenly we have this hype and a lot of attention on what is happening. And this is like a curse and and a blessing at the same time, I think. But for me, what is interesting to see how this also creates more possibility to exhibit digital art. And not only to have it on a 2D scroll of a website, but to see what other possibilities there are to exhibit this kind of art. Maybe we can talk about this later, since we are in this kind of spatial session of the panel.
Rolf, when I saw kind of like pictures of the next generation village, it looked like a kind of like, how can I say?
Utopia.
In a game.
Or
Yeah,
a game.
like in here we go. What's exactly your vision? What exactly you're doing or want to do kind of like in the future?
Yeah. Well, it actually started with a thought experiment. So if we could start all over again from scratch, how would we rebuild our society in the light of the great challenges we're facing and enabled by the technological tools we have and didn't have like 100 years ago? So our interdisciplinary team conducted research in various areas like the future of food and mobility and energy and construction and finance and governance and how it interrelates on a systemic level. And then we broke it down into very specific modules and building blocks and assigned these to various partners in the Swiss ecosystem because we believe everything is out there. We just need to create this regulatory sandbox where we can test it all together. And so where we are right now, we've talked to various cantons and also area developers in Switzerland, and what we realized, we were automatically in the role of consultants because we have a great team, we have good concepts and research, but we don't have land, we don't have a capital, and we don't have a large community yet. So the logical step is going into the virtual world. So now we're simulating that village of tomorrow virtually and build up the community there so that you can become a virtual citizen, participate in various sub-DAOs like the Food DAO or the Art DAO, and then receive utility tokens. And that way, build a community, simulate the village, and then we can prototype it in the physical.
So I wasn't that wrong with the game, though.
With the game?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That gives more a glimpse of what you're doing. So the overall topic of this session is living spaces. And may I ask all of you, what will property and also ownership mean at all in the future? Maybe Una, you can, because of your house, I mean, it's a prototype, and for me, I was thinking about that in kind of like a bigger scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very philosophical answer, I guess, to this. I ask myself every day with the prototype, I'm with No One's One, like, what is actually self-owning? What is ownership? And it turned out ownership is a fake concept that we made up. It's actually a collective rights that we think about, and that the ownership is. It's actually not a one concept, and it's very much true in legal sense too. That in law, it's also the concept of bundle of rights. That the rights that attach, for example, my glass, it's not my glass. I rent it now. I can drink from it. There's a certain right I have. I exert certain ownership to this glass in front of me, and we exert certain ownership to everything that we think belongs to us and legalize in the system. That's basically, and then to have the opportunity to defend ourselves by issuing lawsuits. That's kind of the system of ownership that we know so far. And I do believe in the future of a more decentralized future and more objective future of ownership, because I think in the past we have been thinking about ownership quite subjectively, like we own things like property. I wonder if ownership is a sense of security for us. It's that we just want a stability in our life, or is it really that we need that paper to prove that we own it? That's my short philosophical answer to that, I guess.
Everybody was nodding, especially you, Marlene. I mean, within arts, it's quite subjective. Art you collect, the more art you have, the more kind of like wealthy you are. How can you relate to what Una just said?
I mean, what NFTs brought to the art world is definitely that you can originalize a digital asset or a digital file, which was before like really hard or almost impossible to do. And which then again makes it easier for artists to sell their work, obviously, because you can start dealing and like have like exchange this value that you now have in your digital asset. But of course, we have to see this in a concept, or maybe also talk about the misconceptions that come with this, because all the hype was then, okay, now we have this democratization, every artist can sell their own work. You know the discourse that has, or the topic that has created around this. But maybe I would say, like in my position, this is a wrong conception, that we have democratization so far. But I don't know if we want to go much deeper into this, but stay with the ownership part. But then we have to see that, of course, this is like, maybe also the reason why this is so hyped is because the internet was a place where ownership was not so easy to be dealt, and the philosophy was actually very different. And if you start to go back really in the 90s and how the first web spaces were created, was really like, here everything is free and free floating, and the liquidity of everything and the reproducibility of everything was an essential part, an essential characteristic of the internet space. And this is now broken, and so we have like this huge shift, I think. And we have to deal with this and see what is actually true with this, and what is actually true of the promises that are created. For example, the democratization, which I think, yes, might be there in some cases, but if you look at the art cases or artists who are working in this space, you will need, I as a curator obviously have to say that, you will need the gatekeepers or the people who curate and organize this content which is created, because otherwise it will be total chaos and Wild West, and nobody will really find its way, even if more and more content is created every day. So
we're going to come. Oh no, Una, you wanted to say something? Sorry, or no?
No. Thanks.
We're going to come back to this hype and to the gatekeepers. Lucas, what are you saying about the hype and the gap between NFTs and yes, that's the way we're gonna go, and status quo?
So the framework we use to think about owning culture in a digital realm is that if you look at the valuation of immaterial goods in the S&P 500 over the last 40 years, it went from 90% physical valuation to 90% immaterial valuation. And if you take all the biggest companies in America and look at their balance sheets, 95% of the value in the stock market is immaterial goods. So there's kind of a clear economic shift towards immaterial goods. At the same time, you've had an explosion of art and culture markets over the last, decades. At the same time, you have an explosion of collectibles such as, old-timers and Japanese whiskey and rare whatever, sneakers or toy figures or what have you. And the biggest machine of dissemination of culture that mankind has built, which is the internet, now has the missing component it always has, which is ownership and native trade. So you have a society that is clearly willing to allocate more and more and more and more amount of funds to culture, and you have the biggest machine that disseminates culture now with ownership added to it. So that's kind of the macro backdrop of things. And then the micro is, we think a lot about Metcalfe's law. So Metcalfe's law is the value of a network increases exponentially with each participant. Think about it in telephone companies, for example. A telephone company with 2 telephones is valueless because you can only make 1 connection. However, if you have 10 endpoints, you can do 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6, etc. connections. So you have a mechanism that where we went from kind of a one-way interaction with art. Let's think about the Mona Lisa, you know, like these thousands of people that go through the Louvre every day and kind of have 5 seconds and look at the same piece and then they walk out, and all these connections are not quantified at all. And then you have, say, the CryptoPunks, which is a series of 10,000 PFPs, similar to the Bored Apes, where the people who own those punks actually interact with a smart contract, and those interactions are quantified and they're transparent, and you can look at all these connections. So we're going from non-networked culture to quantifiably networked culture. And that just has a totally different, we don't know what's going to happen, of course, but we believe that that is a very different way of what's actually going to happen down the line.
But it seems like there is kind of like this huge gap. You said you have no idea how the future will look like, but I'm sure you have a vision, or you have like ideas of solutions. What is that in your case with Dialectic?
Solutions to what?
To fill this gap?
Well, I mean, innovation is hard to predict, and it's just going to happen at some point. And you know, you can just position yourself in a way where you think. In our specific example, we collect things that we think are important, and that kind of are exemplary of our time. For example, we own Human One by People, which was a sculpture that was famously sold at Christie's last year. And we believe this sculpture kind of represents the bridge between the physical and the digital, and this idea of the metaverse, which, you know, we could get into hour-long discussions of what that actually is. But we try to find cultural assets that we think speak of the relationship of today to tomorrow, rather than the relationship of today to yesterday. And if you ignore networked culture or the digital realm today, it just means you're actually thinking about yesterday. And the key moment I realized this was when I went to see my godson. He's 10. And I said, oh, I'm going to start to work at an NFT fund. And he's like, oh, cool, show me your NFTs. And so I went through the collection, and he knew like 70% of the NFTs we have in the fund. He's 10 years old. Like, for him, it's an absolute no-brainer to own a CryptoPunk, because he sees his best friend more in Roblox than he sees his best friend in real life. So hanging a painting in his Roblox house is absolutely native to him. And that was the moment it clicked for me, where I realized, like, the kind of mind acrobatics we have to do to understand the concept of digital ownership, of owning a digital asset, is not going to be the same in the next generation, because for the next generation it's just going to be, sure, of course, why wouldn't I own a digital asset?
Next generation, talking about the next generation village, the whole village. How is that going to be kind of like in your case when it comes to living spaces, when you tell somebody else about your vision? I mean, now we heard this 10-year-old boy, I think, your godson. I think in the future that's going to be easy for you, but right now it's quite hard to understand what kind of like what you want. So when it comes to living spaces, how can people collaborate in what kind of levels? Do they have to be experts, or can I, if I would have an idea, can I be also a collaborator?
So actually the idea is that each topic is represented by a virtual area. So you have the future of food area, and so you can kind of contribute in the area where you have most expertise. And the level of expertise can also be kind of represented by an expert badge you hold. So whenever you make a decision within the collective, we can combine it like with a liquid democracy. So the idea there is that you can delegate your vote to someone who has more expertise in that field, and these people can be identified through their expert badges they hold, for example.
No, go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
And something else I just wanted to add on what Una said. I think it's a very important trend also we see going away from ownership in various areas towards access. But I think we're not like quite there yet, because what we see now is, let's take the example of mobility, right? So a mobility system, it's coordinated by a smart algorithm that kind of detects which vehicle is empty now and you can use it. So you have a higher use efficiency of the existing goods. But like the vehicle and the data is still owned by a corporation, and in that case, it would be owned by the vehicle itself. And I think this is also an important concept then in the village. So we're organized as a DAO as well. So the DAO is kind of owned by its citizens, by its members, not by a corporation in the back. And I think this is important also to understand that we're like a cooperative.
So could it be that the next generation village will have some now once houses?
Absolutely.
Noted that it's on record, right?
Good. Brilliant. Time is flying, I see. So we heard about what ownership can be attached in the future. So not anymore to kind of like a space or things. But what are specifically with No One's Wants the kind of like the problems you have or you see? I mean, specifically with the money, it's not real money. You've been trying it out, kind of. Why not yet?
Well,
that's right.
I mean, with No One's One, I almost only see problems. I mean, I mean, our position is to be provocative and ask questions that you're not comfortable with, so that we can start thinking about this in the scenarios in the future. And then,
I mean, we are researchers, right? So we don't try to make money out of No One's One, but we really try to ask the interesting questions that emerge with this new technology, because we start to see puzzle pieces of what's possible. I think it's way more obvious in the digital space with our, like, as soon as you have like a commodity like money, it's way easier to represent that on a decentralized ledger technology, right? Then it gets a bit more complicated with NFTs. They're easy to code, but how do you connect them to the physical goods, right? There are already a bit more questions around how this exactly works out, and there's a lot of experimentation going on. And it gets more and more complex once you enter like the physical world and you try to introduce these concepts of Web3, which in essence means ownership of data or digital goods back to the end user. So you kind of, as Bitcoin tried to disintermediate the banking system or the insurance system, or is intermediating it, you can continue this thought about like what if a house owns itself, right? And then you start to interact with the real estate market and the housing market, which is way more complicated, and there is a lot of interesting questions popping up, but also way more complexity that is hard to solve in a technical sense. So we also see a lot of technical problems in that sense. Also regarding smart contracts, there are a lot of possibilities, but it's very hard to code a real secure smart contract that handles all the edge cases that could happen in a complex world that we're living in. That's why No One's One is running on the testnet, because it is not at the stage where it could run on its own in a way and without any errors or things going bad, right? But nevertheless, you need to start to try and inspire the people what's possible with this new technology. And I definitely think it's part of the future that we will see more cyber-physical interaction in our real world. And as Una pointed out, the house is a living machine. There are a lot of sensors and computers in it. I mean, why shouldn't we start transacting with houses, so to say, right? I mean, for the next generation, this will be way more obvious, right? That you pay the fridge to fill it up, right? Or I mean, there is a lot of mini use cases, right?
Yeah, and I have just reaction to it. I do believe that on a very philosophical level also, like, what are we willing to pay for in the end? It's actually what we value will be completely different in the next generation. That's exactly why the cyberspace will be way more important, because in the end, what we value is it's an extension of ourselves. We see property as an extension of ourselves. That's what we value, and we put our emotion in things, but not only in things. These are inanimate things, but also cyberspace is the same. So that's what I also see in next generation will for sure happen, and it will be cyberspace will be in the emphasis in the future. And how ownership for sure will be transformed. Exactly, I don't know how, but it will be transformed. We've already seen, I don't know if you two know, the artwork that's always on sale. That's an example that I like to use all the time. It's an NFT, that is an artwork that's always on sale. So it's challenge, like when, for example, digital blockchain is used in ownership, then you can have extreme transferability. And you can be on sale every second, every minute. Once you own it, it can be on auct, which is drastically different from old art piece that we own, and how this extreme transferability would change. And then, like Ralph said, the access, right? Like in the future, maybe we more emphasize on access. Like ownership is a series of rights. You have access right, you have occupants, you have management, you have exertion, you can like exclude people out. This is all series of things. But it's in the future of ownership, do we actually emphasize on the accessibility instead of actually the exclusivity that we always thought about, that we have the right to exclude other people from our property? Instead, we change that from access point of view. I think this is all going to shift because of blockchain's capability.
One last question, and then it's your go for your questions or your inputs to you both. When it comes kind of like to art in the future, what is your vision? We heard a lot about now Jonas and Jens' vision. What is your when it comes to NFT and art?
I would like to see, or what I'm excited to see, is really to the spaces that are going to be explored virtually and also physically, to experience digital art and what is possible in the metaverse, for example, and not only in a metaverse that rebuilds physical worlds like we see in Decentraland or we see in other places, but metaverses or just virtual spaces that don't rely on physical laws or anything, are just completely new and completely new environments, and also completely new experiences of how we can interact with these artworks, for example. And to go back to what we have been discussing this before, maybe one buzzword that we can throw into this is like fractionalized ownership, so which expands this kind of notion of ownership, not only devised to one person, but several people, and that you can actually, that this technology really enables to think creatively of what we have been thinking collecting means, and that we can really think about okay, so I cannot afford to buy this artwork, but maybe I can be part of this DAO, and then this DAO can afford to own this artwork, and then I can still be able to participate in something bigger as I could myself. And one thing that I wish to happen for also institutions, and maybe also more classical institutions in the art world, that this technology brings a lot of interesting use cases and potentials for them to enter the space. Not maybe on the speculative level, because I mean a museum collection will not sell their works as an NFT, but to think of accessibility, especially to parts of the collections which are never visible, artworks that are in depots around the world, media artworks that are on some kind of servers, nobody sees them. It could be interesting to think about how we can make this knowledge or information or artworks accessible to a lot of people through this technology, for example.
And then we're going to come back to what you said at the beginning with the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
The time is running, I'm so sorry, but after everybody said something, I have like 50 other questions in my mind. But now the stage is yours. What kind of questions do you have? What kind of expertise, inputs? Yeah, here we go. Perfect.
Hi everyone. Thanks. I'm loving really I'll stand up so you see me. I'm really loving the discussion. I love, Ralph, how you said, well, let's start from scratch. Let's think this all from the beginning. I love that blue sky thinking. I have a question. And please take it conceptually, because it's very terre-à-terre. The question is, what would be the fiscal status of a self-owned house? And what would be fiscal, tax status of a self-owned house? And what would be the civil liability, civil responsibility status of a self-owned house, village, you name it?
That's exactly the question we're asking the legal experts. Like, what would be the liability of a self-owned house? And that's a bigger question also what we have with autonomous vehicles. Like, who take the responsibilities once something happens? And well, one easy way out would be that actually it could be have the intelligence to hire its own legal representation, for sure. Like, but I don't know how it will be registered legally. I mean, we had breakthrough of registering robots as a citizen before, and how autonomous things will be like in the future, right? I have absolutely no answer to that.
We don't know. And as I think the playing around is the right level that we're at the moment, right? And it seems a bit to us that the legal experts are always kind of ruin the game in a way, right? They're always telling us this is not possible, right? But then my answer is, well, it's technically possible. It's a decentralized system, so once you create, it's there. So deal with it, right? And that's so we see what they come up with, right? But we don't know the answer, right? I mean, these are very important questions to answer before they can go full scale. But it's important to show them that it's possible and that it works in a way, right? Otherwise, they don't move. They just say, no, it's not possible within our legal system, and then that's it, right? And they just ignore that you can still create it, right?
But it's very important to incorporate in the legal system, very important. That's why I also do research on the legal so that I can have a good argument with them. One of the legal experts I talked to, he said he's the slayer of dreams. And, and basically we're dreaming, and he's slaying us. And but I do think, like Jens said, technically it's possible, and we have to deal with it in the future. And let's answer that collectively, right?
So there's a nice anecdote from the NFT collectors world that deals with similar questions at the moment. The NFT you see over there, it's a Bored Ape. It's a series of 10,000 pictures of apes, and it got very famous because they got very expensive. And there's an artist called Ryder Ripps who used to be the creative director for Kanye West, and he has some beef with the Bored Ape Yacht Club. And what he did was he created the Ryder Ripps Bored Ape Yacht Club token, which were a series of 10,000 tokens that had links embedded to the original ape pictures. So the apes were stored on Interplanetary File System, which is a decentralized storage facility, and those links are actually public. And now he minted tokens that pointed to the links of the original Bored Apes and sold those tokens. And everybody went completely nuts because it's like, no, you're stealing our work. But he's not really stealing your work, he's just pointing to a link on IPFS. And that's what I meant earlier with we don't really know where we're going, we're just going somewhere. How do you deal with copyrights in a transparent system where you could actually sell a link to something? Who knows? We will find out. But that's why it's playing around.
Yeah, I think the real challenge people are having issues at the moment is that when everything is transparent regarding data, how do you make money? I mean, that's the question I always hear, right? And it's kind of conflicting with the system we have nowadays, right? Data is valuable, and suddenly you have a complete transparent system, and it's something else becomes valuable, right? Even though everyone can access these pictures, having the ownership of it is actually something that is valuable, right? The same thing, I think there will be new business models. Even though all the data is transparent, you will still be able to make money. But there is a rethinking needed about this, and we are not that far yet. we're just people just starting to realize that things are about to change, right? And they need to wrap their head around that.
Wait until his godson is older, then all the problems are solved. So, final questions over there from Martin. Yes. Oh, sorry. What was that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Martin. You're going to be next. Hi.
Okay. Hi. Well, I have. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's really interesting to see No One's One, which is the first DAO that I know of that has an actual physical object in the world. And so I'm doing research on exactly this. What is a DAO and how should we legally qualify it? And I think you came with the right question. And so what I wanted to ask for you is, how should we treat DAOs? You think we should make them out of the out of our legal space? Should we create a new legal order that would qualify DAOs, and they would have their own legal representation, or should we try to actually link them to Switzerland? What would you want to do with that project? What is the most logical thing for you?
You mean the next step?
No. So what I mean is, if we just make a thing, make thoughts about it. So would you wish No One's One to be out of the Swiss legal order, so to be something else than a Swiss company? Or should we try to bring it to Switzerland and try to qualify it? Try to say, well, that DAO qualifies as, I don't know, an association or a partnership.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the research, we want to take it as radical as possible, that we showcase the possibilities. But if we want to implement it and integrate it into our society and actually deploy it, then it will have to integrate into a Swiss system. And I see Swiss system, I mean, the other day I also just had a conversation. I see Swiss system is probably the closest governmental system to a DAO in the whole world, possibly. It's a direct voting, has almost a lot of elements. People are used to voting and this democracy way of thinking. So who knows, maybe we're the first.
Thank you very much. So one last question from Martin, and then we're ready for the next break, I think.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure who would be able to answer this question, but people say that all these systems with blockchain-based technology requires a lot of energy, because obviously computers have to run to keep all these softwares and codes running. And if now we imagined a dreamt world where everything would be based on that, how much energy would we need? Is that sustainable? What is your thought about that?
Who's catching the knife?
Yeah,
I think you have a quite interesting solution.
Well, I mean, I don't have a technical background, so I can't go into detail, but as far as I know, please correct me, there are different protocols out there, right? And so there are some blockchains that use way less energy because it's not the protocol that Bitcoin has, for example. But I mean, this is a very complex question. Like we have to see also where energy can be saved through the system that is more efficient, and where it needs more because for all the data that needs to be stored and kind of the riddles that needs to be solved. But this is definitely, I think, one of the most important aspects that should be taken into consideration.
And how is it working in the Next Generation Village when it comes to sustainability?
Well, so there are different ideas. So it should work as a circular economy. But one interesting aspect is, so we want to create an environmental token. So the idea there is that we can internalize externalities via the price system. So the basis is kind of a digital twin of the natural ecosystem, where indirectly nature determines how many tokens are into circulation. And then every citizen gets a monthly budget and can allocate these tokens to different goods. And when a good has a higher environmental footprint, you need to pay more of these tokens. So this is one idea we have, how to kind of internalize these negative effects on the environment in the economic system.
Which blockchain are you on? Or which chain are you on?
Which chain?
So this system, we haven't decided yet on which chain it will be on. Yeah.
So we have to find an end right here. Doesn't mean that we can discuss it further because it's time for an inspirational break. But first of all, a big round of applause for all of you here. Thank you very much. For the final input, I'm pleased to welcome on stage Kei Kawamura, co-founder and partner of the Studio Banana, a design agency remaining the experience of working and learning through community-led environment. A warm welcome for him.
Thank you, Celine. I'm going to ask you one thing, is to drop your telephones for about 3 minutes. Only 3 minutes. Don't be shy, Lucas. All right, enough. We're getting close to lunchtime. I understand. Thank you, everyone. I'm Kei Kawamura. Celine, thanks for your intros. You might be asking yourselves, well, I came here for a Web3 conference, and what's this guy doing on stage making us clap and do the Mexican wave? Well, bear with me a few minutes. Hopefully you'll understand why I've just done this little experiment. I'm an optimist. I think it was half successful. All right, as Celine mentioned, I'm Kei Kawamura. I'm an architect by training. I'm the co-founding partner at Studio Banana. We're a design agency, and we help organizations reimagine the experience of work and learn through community-led environments. So we create environments that activate communities. Not very different to, I think, the intention here at the gallery, the bigger purpose of creating this hub for Web3 ecosystem. Over the years, we've been working with lots of organizations of very different types, from public administration, intergovernmental, corporations, NGOs, startups, scale-ups, Teal, Holacratic, you mentioned, very different organizations. We've also had pretty cool experiences in the space of crowdfunding, and also in a very special type of organization, which I've drawn lots of lessons from, and today I'll share some of them with you, which are accelerators, incubators, hubs, places where there's a vibrancy of a whole ecosystem that's trying to break something, make something new. We've worked with crypto, we've worked with biotech, fintech, food tech, prop tech, very different ecosystems, creating these kind of hubs and accelerators. So some of the things that I'll share with you today are lessons that we've drawn from those experiences. The theme that Decentrum kind of asked me to open up now, and hopefully we'll continue afterwards also during the panel discussion, is future-proof companies, or my take is future-proof organizations. And from my experience, from our experience, what makes an organization truly future-proof is not having the best talent, is not having the best customer service, is not even offering the best product. That's all great, but really what makes an organization future-proof, and by future-proof I mean sustainable, resilient, able to overcome all sorts of challenges, uncertainties, and changes around, is to mobilize an authentic sense of community. And I'd like you to focus on these last 3 words: authentic sense of community. And that's precisely what we offer to organizations we work with. Through design, we create environments that activate communities. Now, this is easier said than done, and we've heard today already several times this notion of community, of DAOs, of villages as well. Communities feel magical when you're part of a community. But it's not by magic that they happen. They happen for different reasons. And what I'm trying to, or what I will try to share with you today is our experience with some of the basic conditions needed in order for a community to become vibrant and resilient. And there's no silver bullet here, there's no formula, it's not a cookie cutter thing that you can just reproduce. Okay, I'm making a new community. But essentially, there are 3 stages through which any community, in our experience, once again, needs to go through. And if the intention here at the gallery is to create this hub, this vibrant community, I recommend you to follow some of these. The first one is spark a flame, which is a little bit what I was trying to do here with Lucas and Sabil and the people behind. And I was sparking the flame. I was just, doing like this, looking a bit goofy here on stage. Then you need to stoke the fire. You need to bring people into that cause, into that mission, into that initiative that you've just sparked. At that point, you need to let go certain things. I was hoping when I came here on stage that it was going to go smooth, left, right, everyone would get it. It wasn't quite like that, but I just let you go with it. And then it's really important that you pass the torch. You give the leadership to the people in the community. It cannot be centralized, otherwise the community will not be resilient. And remember what I said at the beginning, it's about future-proof organizations. It's about becoming resilient. It cannot be all centralized and dependent on an individual or a limited subset of people in this community. Now, 3 warnings. At each stage, you will need very different things. At the beginning, you need courage. You need someone goofy, someone with no stage fright to come here on stage and do, something funny. So you need courage. And I mean, what I'm seeing here already is very courageous, creating here in Öpfikon, of all places, in the Vorstadt of Zurich, this hub where we're showing NFT art pieces, where we're bringing a community. I think that's courageous. When you stoke the fire, you need energy. That's really when you can make it or break it. That's when you need to identify who are the key players, who are the champions in this community, and fuel them with energy, really. That's really energy demanding. And pass the torch. That requires trust. It means that you're aligned. You have understood you've got a common mission. Now you can just trust the people to carry on, and you're not going to be constantly there leading. As I said, again, it's easier said than done, but hopefully it gives you a little glimpse into how a community can be built on 3 stages, which is a little bit what I was trying to do with you here with the Mexican wave. Well, we became a mini community that lasted for about a minute. Each one had a different role. There were the early adopters, there were the laggers. At the end, pretty much everyone. I saw the ones who didn't do it. I'll talk to you afterwards. So, after sharing with you these 3 stages, also the dimensions that you need to activate when you work in a community. And again, based on our experience, you need to work on the people, identify the key people, who are the initiators, who are the ones who are going to champion the cause of that community. You need a place, and here I believe very much in the power of place, not because I'm a trained architect, but because I believe places can become catalysts. They crystallize the energy of a community. I think, Martin, you said earlier in the first panel discussion, we still need in real life, IRL experiences. There's, of course, technology that enables, technology that is shared, and I'm here talking, I think, to preaching to the converted. Certainly there's people in this audience that know much more than me about how technology can enable community building. And you need processes. By processes, I mean rituals, you need
certain things that are common, a language that is shared by the community, that can also evolve, but you need that common language. Okay, and if this was not enough, and if some of you are still doubtful about what I'm here proposing to you, I've got proof. I've got really a couple of examples. When, again, the Zentrum asked me about future-proof, I like always looking back at things that have been around for centuries, for millennia. Those are really real future-proof organizations. And I've got here a couple of examples which are a little provocative. But one is religion, and the other one is football clubs. Or football clubs maybe less old. Religions, certainly, spiritual systems have been around for a long time. They have proven very resilient. They have central places. They have, these kind of temples, cathedrals, stadiums, in the case of football teams. Places where you can really feel the fervor, the passion, where that community, that ecosystem comes together. But they've also been very cunning, very smart in networking themselves. With religion, it's decentralized network of churches or chapels, or, in the most remote of places. You can't build a cathedral in a remote island in the Outer Hebrides, but you can build a little temple, a little chapel, and that's enough for that religion to say, I'm here to support you people. Oh well, clubs have done this also in a very smart way through pay-per-view following online or on TV. And then also, at some point, you need to distribute the power. And again, talking about distributed autonomous organizations. You can let people just pray. Well, here it's the Catholic Rosary. Many religions have their own ways of distributing the capacity to connect to spirituality. Football teams have the Panini stickers that my kids love. They spend hundreds of francs. I can't wait till the next World Cup. All right, well, in a nutshell, and not trying to get us all too distracted or wasting too much time here, but something important is community building needs to be authentic, keep it real, keep it simple as well, keep it fun. I think, Lucas, you mentioned it this morning, functional. Fun is really important. I believe that as well in that. And keep it hybrid. I think the No One is One is a perfect example of a hybrid experience. It lives in a digital space, it lives in a physical space, it brings people together. We are queuing there, we're having conversations around that. So, without further ado, thank you very much. Let's have a great panel discussion now. Thank you.
So now we know what we need. We just need a new religion. So I'd love to welcome for the last panel discussion, along with Kay, Dr. Stefan Holzer, co-founder of Veritic, a company that makes NFTs more user-friendly and secure by providing an institutional NFT infrastructure. And as well, Lena Effinger, here we go, psychologist and senior consultant, and as well trainee at Energy Factory St. Gallen. That's a consulting company in the areas of leadership and culture transformation. Welcome. And as well, Simone, here we go, Emmanuel Schmidt. Hoppa. All right. Solutions engineer at Edge & Nod, the initial team behind the graph. What a nice round again. Thank you very much for being here. As we just heard from your input, future-proof companies is like the over topic we're going to talk in this session. And with your background, Stefan, as well as at McKinsey and Bank Vontobel, you know the corporate world. We have now heard a lot of examples and ideas as well from the whole morning of the potential of Web3. What does it take to kind of make the corporate world to embrace that?
I think it will take time first. Like the corporate world need to get used to new ways of working, new ways of ownership, as we discussed. And I mean, some companies are already like working into this direction. Like they're building a sense of community among the employees. I think this will further increase. Like we will potentially also see companies giving parts of the ownership to the employees in more ways, and also incentivizing them in different ways. And this is, of course, partially different than what many companies right now are doing. And I think it will mainly take time. It will take the courage, as you say, to start. Typically, companies start like maybe with a small subset to test it out, how it works, and then use it as a flagship project to incentivize like other employees to join in this way and start a community in a small part of the company, and then expand to the entire company and learn from that. So I think that's probably what will happen, very similar to digitalization. It also started in some parts of the community, and then it expanded to the entire company.
Lena, as well from your perspective, from your work, but as well from your perspective as a psychologist, what would you say makes a company a future-proof company?
I think there's many answers to that depending on what the company is as of today. I think you always have to be kind of aware of what you're talking about, because a company is not like one is not the other. From maybe combining the roles I have from the Energy Factory and as a psychologist, what we have in common, those both roles, is we're trying to look at research a lot. And since we from the Energy Factory working together with the University of St. Gallen, what we see, for example, is that it's been so many years ago already that we can kind of see that companies that acknowledge the fact that new work needs new culture as well, that they actually have an advantage. Not only when it comes to fluctuation numbers, but also to innovation or even growth. So I think that's pretty much what we have to kind of look at when we talk about Web3. We look from the techie side, but we definitely need to look also from the cultural side, because it doesn't serve anything if we have the best infrastructure, but people don't use it.
Simon, you've been nodding now a lot. From your perspective, what she just said, like the new way of work, do you have an expertise in this, or kind of like a good example? How are you doing it within the graph?
Yeah, it might be interesting. Like the graph by itself started as a fully remote company. And so that was kind of before Corona, one of those pioneers that do this. It was actually common in the blockchain space, but otherwise not so much. And then with kind of the creation of the Graph Foundation and the token launch, it started to decentralize more. So there are now core devs. That's why I work for Edge and Node and not for the graph, because the graph by itself is a protocol. But to go back to that point is, interestingly, Edge and Node has now a space, a physical space in San Francisco, where we try to come together, but not only with us as a company, but also with the broader ecosystem to really sit together and work on problems together. And I think the reason to do this is that it is kind of a fact that at some point to have innovation creation happening, you need to be together. But in my personal opinion, to get work done, I'd like to be alone.
But that's so true.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been a little bit too fast. Can you, because I'm really honest, with all the speakers, I had the most time I needed for the work of Simon. So could you explain it in your words, or better said, how would you explain what you're doing to your grandma?
Yeah, I do something with computers. No, I mean, like in a nutshell, like I'm solutions engineer. That translates probably to German as a technology consultant, and we were in German it would be.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
It's okay. Yeah, technology consultant, the Technologieberater.
All right.
That's what I say. Usually the conversation is over then. But like the thing is with the graph protocol that I work on and that I integrate with different teams, it's a very technical data protocol that sits between the blockchain and the user interfaces. And my job is to work with those teams together and make the integration good.
The same question for you. Can you really quick explain, like in 3 sentences, what Veritic is doing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have heard about NFTs earlier today. And so currently the way you're taking care of the NFTs is you have it in your self-custody wallet, which can be secure or maybe not, depending on your setup. But in the cryptocurrency space right now, we have like custodians that are taking care of the security for you, and they're making it very user-friendly to interact with the NFT. With the cryptocurrency, which is not the case for NFTs yet. And we are basically taking what people have done in the cryptocurrency space and bring it to the NFT space. Like these 10 years of experience that custodians collected, we bring the same infrastructure, the same security and user-friendliness now to the NFT space, that you can log in with a so-called Web2 interface, that you know, for example, from your e-banking. And there you can buy and manage all your NFTs. You don't need to have your own wallet. And also for companies, for example, when they want to have NFTs, they sometimes cannot do it because of regulatory reasons. They need to have an external wallet provider, which is something we could do. And yeah, we're working a lot on infrastructure, on security, and business development right now, of course. Yeah.
Lena, when it comes to your role as a consultant, what's the biggest challenge you're facing?
I think we're missing the recipe people ask for. So someone said it before. I think it's very important to just be courageous here. Because, I mean, you can look that up also. There's so many interesting studies, and we've also have had some longitudinal studies where we kind of looked over several years into companies trying to define what makes a company future-proof when it comes to being profit-wise successful and also in adapting to the new way of working, whatever that means. I mean, we saw the big possibilities here today. And I think that my biggest challenge would be that if people approach us, they say, we want to either get better or something is wrong. And the question would be, how do we solve this? And that's, I think, something that is very human. And there I come back to me being a psychologist, because then you have, what do you have to do? You have to ask. You have to ask first and then understand, and I think that's the biggest challenge, because people need to invest into answering first. And yeah, I think that's it. And I love to find not a recipe, but a solution.
What I really loved to come to a solution is your slide about sparking the flame, and then hopefully stoke the flame and then pass the torch. How can we spark the flame if the spark is not here?
You think that spark is not here?
Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's say when the spark is here, like how can we kind of like stoke the flame then?
It requires some disruptors. I think that you can't play by the rules. That's really important. And you know, I was the one who asked about sort of the legal question before, but at the same time, I think you need to play with, and we heard that before, playing with. You need to play with the fringes, and you know, play it a little dangerous. Be courageous. I mean, you might fail, but you need to push the boundary, and you need to identify those people. They are not the early adopters, not even the early adopters. They become before. They are almost crazy, and there are probably some of them in this room who said, yes, we can definitely turn this into a real hub, and I can definitely find like-minded people. I can definitely convince maybe in corporations some inbound disruptors to play along, but it requires that level of craziness at the beginning.
I love the craziness. So, speaking about the, no, sorry, you wanted to admit
Can
something?
I add something?
Yes, sure.
Thank you so
Go
much.
ahead.
The experiment you did in the beginning with the waving hands, I think that was something we can take a message out of that is different from yours. Because I think that whatever we do when we approach new things, humans need model learning. So we're always talking about the change curve, right? With the early adopters, the late followers, the laggards, blah, blah, blah. But we need model learning. And I think this is so valuable to see, because if you would have not responded to him, nothing would have happened. And if you would have been maybe even a little less autocratic with continuing with this gesture, then we would have reached a self-sustaining system, which is what we're aiming for whenever we do change, right? You want to go out of it at some point. So if we would have accepted the fact that we are doing the wave ourselves, because we would have understood the system after we have learned it from you, giving it there to model learning, then we would all have followed. And then the question would have been, who stops it, right? So that's, I think, something from psychology we can really transfer into whatever we have been talking about here today. Go out there, find models, be curious, ask questions, and then try and be courageous, because that's something we've had in the break. We have been having a discussion before. And then to like tiny experiments, because only with experiments you can learn how to transfer to your own space, I think, because otherwise you can't do it with the recipe, and you need to have a space to fail. So do experiments, and by the way, whenever experiments are lasting long, something's wrong, stop them.
Like to have the space to try out, to learn, to fail, but also to have like small steps of success, I think. And you're saying with Veritech, you will make NFTs more user-friendly. We heard it before in the panel before, nor in the discussion before. More user-friendly means what in your case? How are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you want to buy an NFT or you want to interact with it, how it usually works, you first need to sign up at a crypto exchange. You need to buy cryptocurrency. That takes maybe a few days until like all these regulatory processes are cleared. Then you need to like set up your own wallet to interact with the blockchain, which might also take some time for some people. I mean, even for me, when I did it the first time, it took a few hours, to really get the seed phrase stored in the right way somewhere so nobody steals it from me. Because if you lose it, you lose all your NFTs in your crypto basically. And then you need to log in with that into an NFT exchange and buy your NFTs. So that's, I mean, for general NFTs. There are like a few NFTs that you can also already buy now in easier ways. But how we make it more user-friendly, basically, you can sign in with your email address. You have like maybe a two-factor authentication, like with your e-banking. On your phone, you enter this code, and then you're secure. Then you can interact with all your NFTs. And that's making it much easier. I mean, that's also how cryptocurrency went mainstream. I mean, if you think back 10 years ago, there were maybe a few 100,000 people using Bitcoin, and you had to physically meet to exchange Bitcoin, basically, right? You had to pay cash. And now, today, you have so many different exchanges and custodians. It's so easy that 300 million people own cryptocurrency. And we need the same for NFTs. And also at the same level of security, of course. Because at the beginning of the cryptocurrency craze, about 20% of Bitcoins got lost. Another 5 to 10% got hacked. And we shouldn't repeat the same with NFTs.
So when it comes to user friendliness, was the key security or trust?
It's that, I mean, user friendliness is in terms that you understand what you're doing and you can do it fast and you know where to click next, basically, right? And currently, if you set up your own wallet, you easily need like a friend to help you kind of who has done it before, if you're not like in the tech space, or you need to like browse online and find maybe some tutorials, maybe from the wallet provider. Yeah. But in the end, I think I noted down the steps somewhere that you need to buy an NFT. And you need currently like 16 or 17 steps, and it can take a few days even, depending on how fast you are, with which kind of providers you're working. And Like there are, as I mentioned, some platforms where you can buy some NFTs fast, but not all, but we want to provide it for all. And with our platform, it can take 30 seconds in the end. You pay with credit card. Yeah.
I really quickly want to come back to another point we've been talking before we switch to user friendliness. It's the failure culture. How do you make sure, Simon, within your team, that there is space and room for a failure culture?
We don't make any mistakes, actually.
All right, Mr. Perfect.
No, sure, no, sure. I mean, like the culture generally. I mean, like if you are working with people together, then it's very important that if someone makes a mistake, that they are not pointed at. And I think in our culture, it's like if mistakes happen, it's always the focus is on like what can we do better, and it's never like why didn't you I don't know, protect your seed phrase or whatever. It's kind of like we try always to come up with solutions to the problems after they happen without making people feel guilty, and that's important, I think, because like then I also know like I can do mistakes, and it's okay because we learn together, and it doesn't feel bad on me personally.
Community activation. Kay, you talked about it in your presentation, how much human being means in a future-proof company. What can you say about like the failure culture, or how do you experience it?
The fail culture.
Yeah, or how would you say is a good way to deal with it? Because in our world, I also have a bit kind of like the experience of it's not really existing, doing failures. We still have that within, that failures are something really bad. And I think to move on, and what we just hear also from Lena, it's really important to have this space of, and we also heard it before from Lukas and Marlon as well, to play with it, and if there is no failure culture, you can't really play, or you can't really try out a new way of work. So, yeah.
I think it's a good question, and there are flip sides to this coin. You know, when you bring people together, when you create a community, there's also social pressure that comes with that. Suddenly you're surrounded, there are expectations, or sometimes inbound, like you create expectations for yourself, that all these people in this community, my peers, they're expecting me to perform like this, to do that. So I think that's I would say the negative side of the community building. How to overcome it? I don't have the formula. I think it's important to understand the diversity, and I think we heard it earlier as well. I think, Ayla, you mentioned the importance of diversity and creating a bit of controversy as well. That the community is not made out of people who all think the same. They are moved maybe by the same mission, or they have the same ideals, but they behave differently, and they have different perspectives on. And the moment you accept that, I think failure takes a different perspective, right? Because you're not. I think you have less expectations of this person is going to do this and that because I believe it's like that. No, that person is probably different than me. We have the same ideals, and maybe that person's approach is different, and maybe what I consider a failure for that person is an amazing success.
We heard a lot about the place where to work, how to work, different kind of like ways of work, and also now user-centered. How can we do it more? Enable people to be part of it, but how can we be bolder, or how can we kind of like motivate companies to be bolder? Because as I hear, all the ideas are already here. Leno.
I start out and you just add it up, okay? we are having the title of future-proof companies, right? When I just listened to you and your question now, I think we have to acknowledge that we're not starting from the scratch like you did with the Next Generation Village. So please maybe think of how can we combine the both worlds best and acknowledge the fact that companies are there usually for a purpose. And first thing first, you need to have a cash flow. And thereby I would say you always have to sustain this also, right? Because otherwise you don't have any legitimation or budget to innovate. And I think many of the companies are right there. They need to kind of secure their cash flow, their efficiency, their whatever they can do best, like their core business, while still innovating for tomorrow. And I think that is maybe something we would have to take into account if we look at that we are consciously trying to do new stuff and not like saying, hey, we're flipping the coin now, and we're trying to be super new and like disruptive at all. I don't think that's working, because then we're really like, we're running over the people. People need to have a why to change, otherwise they won't follow. And I think maybe that's, you maybe know the concept of ambidexterity, and I think that is something that is very important when we think of these very far away innovations, because only if you encourage people that there might be something in for them, right? Doesn't matter if you're a profit or non-profit organization, but people need to know their profit of being at the company. And if you kind of maybe tell them it's both hands, being good at what you do now, but also be open to develop and be innovative, then I think that might be a real good future-proof recipe for companies to sustain. I think that might be something, and failure culture, by the way, adds to this. Failures or mistakes have to be treated so differently if you're in an efficiency-oriented, high-quality, high-security context versus doing mistakes in an innovative creativity context. And I think that might be also something very important to talk about and to teach before you even start of, I don't know, whatever you do, changing, innovating, whatever. Be clear about that. Make the people part of it and make them understand there's a difference in these two worlds. And both might be actually the future. Does that make sense?
It makes sense for sure. Yes. And to talk about failures, I've once done a round of like talking about failures. It was called Fuck Up Friday or something. And I was so amazed by what that's done to me within talking about it. I've been so nervous about talking this huge failures, and all the others were sharing it as well. And it was such a different atmosphere, and it felt not as a failure anymore afterwards. We're open up for the questions or like for inputs, expertises from you. If there are any questions or if you want to state something, be part of the round. There were different topics here. Just give a sign to Stefan, he's over there waiting with his microphone. Don't be shy, even I'm hungry. Here we go, Ayla.
Hey, very interesting talk. This community activation stuff is so important. I was wondering what you think about traditional companies using DAOs as like a platform for innovation and seeding ideas.
I can answer that maybe. Because it's maybe interesting to see how the graph evolves. So initially there was one team, kind of a centralized entity, the Graph Inc. And then they see that, okay, it will be a protocol, so it needs to have a token. Then token was launched, and it was kind of the first core dev was spinned out into Edgenode. That's the company I work for, and the graph was just like a foundation that is the treasury and stewardship. It's kind of a common team, right? And then new core dev teams were hired into that, which are separate entities. They do not have kind of interrelationships, only with the graph. And now the Graph Foundation starts to spin out DAOs for specific actions. So for example, there is the Advocates DAO, which actually comes back to the question before, kind of how can you activate the community? And that's one idea. So you say like, okay, we create now a DAO, and people can apply for that DAO. The DAO should organize itself. Initially, they receive money from the foundation, but interestingly, it's kind of how they organize, it's up to them. And what they need to, but their mission is to spread awareness about the graph. And so you have this kind of clear set of mission or vision, and then you give it, you have some kind of money stream coming in. Eventually it could be self-sustainable. And then like the cool thing is like there were 10,000s of applications to become an advocate in the Advocates DAO. Now they have kind of this path where you can progress. First you just kind of on Twitter say you're an advocate, but then if you work your way up, then you receive maybe some NFTs that say like now you're in the higher level, and you can gamify the engagement with those DAOs. So that's very interesting to see.
Is there another question? If not, I'd love to come back to your example of the church and the sport example as well. You've been talking about the mission right now, Simon, and we heard it from Martin at the beginning with the goal you kind of need, but everybody of the community has like its own, or like people who are working together has its own interpretation of a mission or a goal. How do you make sure that all the guys who work together are aligned? Maybe you also can answer it, Simon. Or
yeah, I think, but it's true like that. I think the initial team, they need to be very strong in their vision and mission and communicate that. And then also, later on, I think as more as a community grow, you kind of need to have this shepherdship that you say like if people deviate a little bit, then you say like why, but we go for this, and to clear this up, because otherwise it could also a little bit flock out, because I mean a lot of people, they're just coming for the money and not for the cause, and you kind of need to be careful to only attract those that come for the money. But I think especially now in these market conditions, it's a little bit easier.
Maybe I can add a story to that.
Go ahead.
Because I think it's such a groundbreaking question, is it? Like, how can I transfer a purpose or make people be motivated and engaged in whatever? And I just had a very nice story to see, because someone said before that if you, I think it was Martin, if you put a company entirely to remote, at some point they might just be detached. Well, I'm actually working with a company since 3 years now, and we're doing a survey each year on culture and also on leadership. And they have been, since the beginning of the pandemics, they were fully remote. They were forced to. So until now, they're not allowed to come back together, which is for some a bit of a pain, I'd say, but that's how they decided to do it. And the most astonishing thing to me is that we just finished the 3rd survey, actually. We saw that the identification and the feeling of we or us was actually increasing over the years. And I think it was also because we were putting a finger on that and saying, hey, it's important to take care of the team and not just make them people go apart. And what I also could see, and that's the story I wanted to share, last year we saw that the understanding and the commitment to the strategy was like decreasing, because you always ask that as well, because people need to know where the company is going to actually go into the same direction, right? Because otherwise they'd be like, hey, speedboats, but not the same direction. And when we saw actually a decline in that, we went out there and built a network of multiplicators who were actually supporting the leaders remotely to talk about the strategy and like really define what is the team doing to the strategy, what's their part in the bigger picture. And when we saw what they actually asked, gave us an answer this year, can you imagine that 3/4 of the entire company, and I'm talking about employees, not leaders, said, I can explain the strategy and I'm convinced it's the right one. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing, because if you make people part of it, and if you make actually network a advantage, and you strengthen the leaders, because I think you need someone who's transferring the message by now. I'm super stoked, because I didn't contribute anything. I only set the topic and gave some ideas how to approach it, but they did the deal themselves. We only had the multiplicators that were there. And I think that's so great. It comes back to that church thing, like kind of a central topic, then you distribute, then you make the network work.
I come back as well to this church topic, or like I stay in this language. when it comes to Veritic, Stefan, how do you make sure that you stay on the right path?
Well, we are also a distributed team. So we work in Zurich, Zug, Berlin, few other locations. And what we do, like basically every few months, we have like an offsite for 1 week where the entire company meets, and we are all together discussing our strategy. I mean, of course, in between, I'm also like thinking about strategy when we need to change certain ways to approach the market, and also the market is changing all the time, of course. Yeah. But I think like we are still a small team, so it's easier, of course, than in a big company that everybody is aligned on the strategy and is working towards that. Yeah. But as we grow, I mean, it's getting more difficult, right?
Is there another question that involves Ayla? It's all right to have a second one though, Stefan, or over there as well. Good. I can hear your stomach. Hör eure Bücher, wir sind bald beim Mittag. Go ahead.
Do we still have time? Okay.
Yes, sure.
All right. I wonder, I mean, when I hear you talking, the connection with Web3 and future-proof companies leaves me with the question, is the future really decentralized? Because we see sometimes we start with hierarchies and then people try to decentralize and they end up again with hierarchies. Or in a sense, you say, Stefan, that we need more centralized custodial solutions so people can actually use the technology. Then I wonder, is decentralization really part of the future? Haven't we figured it out? Because in a sense, for now, we often replicate the existing hierarchical systems just with a new technology. And it could do more, but what do you think? Is it actually realistic that it could do more and be more decentralized?
I mean, I think we could be more decentralized, but centralization, I believe, will very likely always be a big part of society. Like some people, they don't want to take ownership of their own life, right? They want to be guided. And we cannot tell them now, you have to do it. I mean, they don't want it, right? We need to be flexible. And I mean, decentralization is giving at least those people who want to live in a decentralized way the opportunity to do it now, which was before not always the case. I mean, but at the same time, there have been also companies before that worked very much in a DAO structure, I would say. Like, for example, many of the big consultancies like McKinsey, BCG, and so on, they had like 2,000 partners. They all own equity in the company. They have like governance mechanisms. Like, all are sort of equal. I mean, not exactly, of course, but they all have their shares. They can vote for it. And that were actually very similar structures to DAOs. And I think now this is simply expanding. I mean, this has been there before, and it has different technology support now to do it in much more efficient ways, even for small companies. And I think we're simply creating options for people. Also, I, as a custodian, of course, we're centralizing NFTs again, but the underlying structure is decentralized. You can always take it out of custody whenever you want. You can put it back. I know many people who worked in a decentralized way with cryptocurrencies and decided to put their currencies into custody at some point, but they thought it's safer. Maybe I don't get attacked, who knows. Yeah. And it's simply creating more options. Yeah. And I think the very important part is of Web3 that the data will not be owned by a single entity, but by all of us, basically. And then you can decide what you do with the data. If you want like one company controlling your data, or if you do it yourself, whatever is easiest for you. It's just creating options in the end, I would say.
To add on really quick before we come to the last question, you started decentralized, and then now you have the office in LA. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Why? It's the other way around.
It's not an office in terms of like, I don't need to move to San Francisco, thanks God. But it is about having a space. I think that they acknowledge, similar to the Full Node in Berlin, that like people should have a place to come together, but they don't have to. But I think to answer, also to give something to that question is, decentralization is just a tool, and with decentralized technology, we can have we build new stuff. I mean, Ethereum by itself, for example, is a very good example of how decentralized collaboration works. But in some ways, it's also centralized because you have Vitalik, which is so very important figure, and then you have the Ethereum Foundation. But still, when you look at it, how it is actually developed with the different core dev teams, now with the layer 2 rollup teams, and with all the protocols that build upon, then this is decentralization. But for some stuff, a centralized and hierarchical organization is probably better. I think with new technologies, it doesn't make one-to-one old stuff better, but it kind of just opens new avenues, and we need to explore those.
Last question from Ayla.
Thank you. One of the things that we struggle with is psychological safety versus encouraging really lively and diverse discussion and disagreement. Does any of you have a good answer for how one balances those two things?
Can you repeat that?
So balancing psychological safety, a safe space where people feel they can have fun and feel good, and balancing that with a space where people are also encouraged to challenge and maybe challenge each other and challenge ideas, or disagree or call out when something maybe isn't right. Sort of balancing those two things. I'm just curious if anyone has good answers.
I think that really depends on the way you challenge people in the end. If you have, for example, a very strong feedback culture where you are trained on giving feedback in the right way, you're also helping people to do their job better in the end, then they're also more happy. But of course, you should have team norms, for example. Some people might prefer to have feedback right on the spot. Others, they might have it only every 2 weeks or every month or so. Yeah. But that's something I think each team in a company might even set up individually. And then you have, again, decentralized teams that all might have different subcultures, so to speak, to make everybody feel comfortable, but also ensure they're improving over time. That's my approach. Yeah.
I will also definitely go first, please. Go.
Well, I have a couple to add. You heard me earlier talking about rituals and how important rituals are. Rituals are things that people share, and they have certain rules, and they have certain periodicity, and they begin, they finish, and then maybe they start again later on. In our studio, we have a couple that I'd like to share maybe with you. One which happens every 2 weeks, and this is almost religious. Every 2 weeks, Monday, 5:30 p.m., so yesterday, last night, we have a sprint celebration. And we celebrate together, but I mean, it's not just throwing a party and opening bottles of beer. We actually celebrate a project's success. So we choose a team who have something they're proud of, they share it, we acknowledge the effort, we acknowledge the achievement, the learnings. They also share with us their struggles so that we can all learn. And well, obviously we clap, we have fun. That's one. And then we have another one which we organize ad hoc, and it's triggered by people that we don't call them custodians, but it would be something like that within our organization. People, for instance, like me, I'm not involved in every project deep down, but I have an overview. And sometimes I see my colleagues, our teams, struggling with subjects, getting stuck. So I suggest them, why don't you organize a project Quake? Quake as in an earthquake, but project Quake. So earthquakes can be very disruptive, destructive as well. So you organize a project Quake, you invite colleagues who have nothing to do with your project, they know very little, you give them very little information actually, and you tell them, this is what I'm doing, this is where I am, and I'm stuck. And they destroy you, and they rebuild you. And but you know that that's the energy, you know that's the behavior. You don't take the critique personally, no one is hurt. You know the ritual. And at the end of the project Quake, which lasts 45 minutes, you've rebuilt it. And everyone's friends again. So there you are, a couple of, but again, it's a matter of language. People know these words, people know they're entering sprint celebration where people know they're entering a project quake.
I think that's very important to frame it. That you also with our feedback sessions that are every few weeks, we have exactly this time where we are prepared for it mentally. And as I said, it depends on the person. If they prefer to get feedback on the spot, we do that. But if they say, "Oh, I want to have like those sessions," and they're prepared for it, and then it's perfectly fine. Yeah.
One last quote from Lena, and then we have to finish.
Pretty briefly.
Yes.
Don't talk about the how if you haven't cleared the what. Go back to the concept of psychological safety. It contains what you're looking for. There is no imbalance. Go back to it. Google Amy Edmondson. It's not about being nice and harmonic. It's actually about what risk am I perceiving if I open up talking about failures or uncertainties. Go back to the concept. Take it to win a coffee, or what was that you have, the platform you're talking about. Talk about it. This concept is so great, but it actually is no imbalance in there. Go back to the what before you go into the how. That would be my recommendation.